I'm divorcing you, you fool, my husband shouted at me over the phone right after I returned from a business trip. I've put up with you for so long, but I've reached my breaking point. If you don't want a divorce, apologize now. I was shocked but said, yeah, I got it. Instead of going to my husband, David, at my in-laws' house, I decided to go somewhere else. My name is Sophie, I'm 28 years old, and I've been married to David, who is 2 years older than me, for 3 years. To put it simply, David is the son of the future CEO of my company. Before we married, I worked at a different company, but after we got married, I switched jobs to work at his company. Now, I work hard as an employee, preparing to be the next CEO's wife. David didn't want me to work at his company, but his father, the CEO, ordered it, and I couldn't argue with that. My job is demanding, and business trips are frequent. We've been trying to have a baby, but my work schedule makes it hard to relax enough for that. Lately, my relationship with David has been getting worse. We're both too busy, and we argue a lot over small things. Just the other day, David yelled at me before I left for work. Sophie, why didn't you wake me up like I asked? I did wake you up several times, David. You told me not to disturb you, and that you would wake up on your own. So, I went to make breakfast. I never said that. Stop lying, he yelled. I'll get in trouble with my dad if I'm late, and now it's your fault. I'm not lying, I woke you up at least 20 times. Your alarm was going off the whole time, too, I argued. I tried to tolerate his irrational scolding, but I finally started pushing back. It led to a huge fight where he said he wanted a divorce. Our in-laws stepped in and helped us avoid a big breakup, but I was getting tired of him throwing around the word divorce over every little problem. One day, while I was getting ready for another business trip, David looked at me with a sad expression. Hey Sophie, off on another trip? He wasn't happy about how often I went on business trips and kept calling them trips. It's not just a trip, it's a business trip. Why do you keep making me say that? I replied, frustrated. Must be nice, always going on trips and leaving all the housework for me. You're probably just sightseeing while I do everything at home, he said. That's enough, I snapped. This is for your company, why can't you just accept it's a business trip? David complained. I can't imagine what it's like to be a rookie, going on trips and doing nothing useful. It's basically a vacation for you. I was really upset. What's wrong with you? Can't you tell the difference between a trip and a business trip? David responded, well, it's true, isn't it? You say I'm stuck with the chores, but you never do anything at home when I'm away. You just leave everything for me. When I'm not home for work, David never does anything around the house. He orders takeout, leaves the laundry piling up, and doesn't even take out the garbage. His laziness makes everything even more stressful, and the divorce threats are just a reflection of his attitude. Even though we both work and spend the same amount of time on our jobs, all the housework is left to me. On top of that, David acts so superior and controlling, which I couldn't stand. Trying to talk to him about it is useless, because he never admits to his mistakes. Instead, he always blames me. As I silently continued getting ready for my business trip, David started yelling again. The future CEO's wife shouldn't be so casual about business trips. If you're not firm like me, the other employees will walk all over you. Exactly, because I'm becoming the future CEO's wife, I have to learn the job and meet with clients. That's why I'm working so hard, I replied. David continued. We live this good life because I'm the son of the CEO. You should listen to me more since it's thanks to me. I couldn't take it anymore. What are you talking about? The company is doing well because of the employees who work hard. Instead of acting like you're so great because you're the CEO's son, you should work harder. David's face turned red with anger. What did you say? What do you mean work harder? I replied. The other day, I heard employees gossiping about you. They said you always push overtime on others, dump tasks on them, and constantly complain. What? Who said that? I'll fire them immediately, David yelled. That's not the point, I said. How can you not see that you're the one at fault? You're only using your father's name. David's eyes widened with anger, and he roughly grabbed my bangs. Don't get too full of yourself. Who do you think got you this job at this company, huh? Ow, let go, I yelled. You're only working at this prestigious company because you married me, got it? He shouted. I was shocked. I've told you many times, I can't avoid this business trip. It's for work. David snapped. Shut up, don't talk back. You married me, so you should just listen to what I say. Suddenly, he let go of my hair, and I fell back onto the floor. If this argument continued, it would probably lead to another divorce scare. So, I forced David out of the room and went back to getting ready for my trip. When I get back, I'll have to clean up a whole week's worth of housework that David has ignored. I'm sure the floor will be covered with clothes again, and the trash won't be taken out. Just thinking about it made me feel exhausted even before my trip. The next day, I went on the business trip as planned. I focused on my work and didn't let personal feelings get in the way. When I came home after a week, I couldn't believe what I saw. "Welcome home," I said, walking inside. The house was spotless, there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere. It looked just like it did the day I left for my trip. I thought, thank goodness, maybe David has finally understood my feelings. It seemed like he had changed and worked hard on the housework. Just as I started feeling relieved that my husband was finally helping, I saw the divorce papers on the table. "What's this?" I said in shock. Next to the papers was a note that said, "I'm going back to my parents' place, we're getting a divorce." Panicking, I called David, and he answered right away. "Did you read the divorce papers?" he asked, sounding casual. His tone annoyed me, and I snapped back, "Wait, are you serious about divorcing me? Obviously, you'd be in trouble if I divorced you, right?" he said, sounding unconcerned. "Don't just casually talk about divorce," I told him. Then David said smugly, "If you want to go that far, I'll set some conditions. If you stop neglecting the housework and listen to me, I might consider withdrawing the divorce, but of course, no more trips for you."
I was furious. "What? It wasn't a trip. It was work," David interrupted. "Are you talking back? If so, I'm divorcing you. You're such a nag." "A nag?" I said, stunned. He can't even do anything around the house himself, and he calls me a nag? If he wanted a divorce, I was ready for it too. "Got it. If you don't want a divorce, come and apologize now," he demanded. I held back the urge to give in and replied calmly, "Okay, I understand. You should have done what I told you from the start. Now come quickly," he said before hanging up. Instead of going to my in-laws' house where David was, I left the house and went to City Hall. I went to City Hall to submit the divorce papers, and they were accepted without any issues. I was officially single again. 3 hours later, while I was packing up at home, my ex-husband and his mother showed up. They were probably getting impatient since I hadn't gone to their house. As soon as they saw me, they started throwing insults at me. "How long are you going to keep me waiting?" my ex-husband yelled. "That's right, you're a failure as a wife, and here you are, out having fun instead of looking after David," his mother added. I replied, "How old is David? He's older than me, isn't he?" Their faces turned angry. "Shut up, stop being stubborn and apologize quickly. We'll really get a divorce if you don't," my ex-husband shouted. "You'll be the one in trouble if we get divorced. Sophie, you could have been the wife of the future president of the company. Are you okay with that attitude?" his mother added. "And if you divorce me, you'll lose this lavish lifestyle. Are you okay with that?" my ex-husband asked. I didn't even care anymore. "Well, I never thought you and David were a good match anyway, so I don't really care," I replied. My ex-husband grinned, looking smug. "Got it. This is your last chance. If you don't apologize now, we're getting a divorce, and I'll kick you out of the company too. Make up your mind quickly." At that moment, I felt an intense anger rising inside me. I had to make him understand that he didn't know the situation. "We're already divorced, you know," I said. "What?" they both asked, shocked. "I've already submitted the divorce papers, and they've been accepted. I'm no longer your wife," I told them calmly. My ex-husband and his mother stared at me, wide-eyed and silent. After a moment, he finally spoke. "What are you talking about? This is a joke, right? There's no way you would have." "Why would I lie? If you don't believe me, go check the records yourself," I said. "No way," he muttered in disbelief. Then his mother, who had been listening quietly, suddenly screamed, "Wait, Sophie, what have you done? You've put a divorce on David's record, our future CEO. It was your son who handed me the divorce papers first. All I did was submit them," I said coldly. My ex-mother-in-law quickly responded, "Cancel the divorce immediately. Do you understand? I'm sorry, but once the divorce papers are accepted, they can't be cancelled. Besides, I have no intention of cancelling," I replied firmly. "What?" she asked, shocked. My ex-husband just hung his head. not knowing what to say, ignoring them both. I continued, I've had enough of being ridiculed every time I go on a business trip. I have to balance work and housework every day. To me, you're nothing more than a burden. Please, Sophie, calm down, my ex-husband begged. Calm down? I'm perfectly calm, I snapped. What's the point of being married if it's only a name? All you care about is yourself, isn't it? I didn't mean it like that, he said, but I could see he was nervous. Do you realize you're losing your place as the CEO's wife? He asked, his tone desperate. Are you okay with that? I didn't transfer to your company to become the CEO's wife, I answered. I don't know how much you've been pampered, but I didn't marry you to take care of you. Are you really ready to give up this lifestyle? My ex-husband pressed. If you just wait a little longer, you'd be the CEO's wife. I absolutely refuse to keep being your caretaker, I said, my voice steady. I'm not your mother, just go live your life on your own. My ex-husband looked like he might cry. His mother, taking a turn, stuttered her final threat. What? I asked, not surprised. If you divorce David, you'll lose your job too, she said, trying to scare me. And so what? I replied calmly. What? Both of them gasped. I've already informed your father that I'm quitting the company, I said, watching their faces drop in shock. To confirm my words, my ex-husband started calling his father. After a few rings, his father answered, and he put the call on speaker. Dad, listen to this. Sophie decided to divorce me on her own, he said. Yeah, I heard. She told me she's quitting the company too, his father replied. She's so selfish, can't you fire her immediately with your CEO powers? Well, I guess I should fire someone ASAP. You, his father said coldly. Instead of reacting like her son, my ex-mother-in-law confronted her husband, my father-in-law. What do you mean by that? She asked, clearly upset. There's nothing to explain. David's a nuisance who contributes nothing to the company. I'm disappointed in his work ethic, he said. What? How can you suddenly say that about our son? She protested. Quiet, he snapped at her. Turning to David, my father-in-law continued, your work performance is poor. You use the company's supplies without permission, make advances on female employees, and complain about the company cafeteria. You're just no good. Do you think I don't know you're being called incompetent by your subordinates? David started to argue, but his father cut him off, saying, I can't cover for you anymore, even though you're my son. You're not getting a free ride just because you're the boss's son. David tried to defend himself, but my father-in-law said, the only thing I can commend you for is marrying a capable wife. Sophie will continue to work for the company, but you're fired, David. David's eyes widened in shock, but my father-in-law kept going, unaffected by his son's reaction. Unlike you, Sophie is meticulous in her work. She brings in a lot of contracts and is highly regarded by our clients. Many companies have contracted with us because of her. David tried to argue, saying Sophie was just assigned to business trips because she was new, but my father-in-law shot that down, saying, we send Sophie on more business trips because we trust her, not because she's a newbie. You were making fun of her, calling it a vacation, weren't you? David protested, but my father-in-law had had enough. Let me tell you something, there's no home for you to return to until you become independent. Never come back to this house, got it? David, in disbelief, said, no way. And just like that, my ex-husband was disowned by his father, lost his job, and couldn't even return to his parents' house. His mother tried to defend him, but my father-in-law told her, it's because you spoiled him, and gave her a divorce notice as well. They ended up using up their savings to rent an apartment but couldn't find any work. Their unemployment continued. I still get messages from my ex-husband, Sophie, I was wrong. I won't make fun of you anymore. I promise I'll take care of myself. Please come back. I can't take it anymore. Help me. He was so persistent that I eventually blocked his number. I didn't want to deal with that mama's boy anymore. Meanwhile, I'm still working hard at the company under my father-in-law, who is now the CEO. I have my own team, and I'm having a fulfilling time at work. It's great because my father-in-law is a supportive boss. From now on, I want to focus on my own goals and not be trapped by meaningless family relationships.
Finally, our dream of building a spacious new home had come to life, and my excitement overflowed as I envisioned the fresh chapter ahead of us. Just as we were about to celebrate this milestone, an unexpected twist threw everything into disarray. My in-laws arrived unannounced, their tone leaving no room for discussion as they announced, "We're moving in here," and requested that my parents vacate the property. I was taken aback, glancing at my husband for support, but all he could manage was a deep sigh followed by the words, "Please just do as they ask. Gently let your parents know." As I watched my in-laws eagerly unpack and settle into what was meant to be our new home, disbelief and frustration swirled within me. "Do you realize this is our house?" I asked, hoping they might grasp the misunderstanding. My name is Tiffany, and at 32, I've enjoyed a loving marriage with my husband Jesse for 4 wonderful years. While we don't have children yet, our life is filled with affection and mutual support. Recently, I had been increasingly concerned about my aging parents. Their declining mobility weighed heavily on my mind, prompting me to suggest that Jesse and I move in with them to provide care. Jesse agreed without hesitation, recognizing the dual benefits of our presence, supporting my parents while also granting us peace of mind. "It's a win-win situation," he had said, and I was grateful for his understanding. As we contemplated this plan, we faced logistical challenges. My family's home was quite far from the city, complicating our commutes, especially since neither of us drives. Relocating my parents to our small rental wasn't feasible either. It was already cramped for just the 2 of us, and considering future children would only worsen the space issue. In light of these challenges, I proposed a bold solution. Why not build a new home that can accommodate everyone comfortably? Jesse's face lit up at the idea. "That's a fantastic idea," he exclaimed. Energized by his enthusiasm, we began planning and building a home that would suit all our needs. When I shared the news with my parents about our plan to build a house for everyone, they initially felt a pang of guilt for the inconvenience. However, once I explained our reasoning, their apprehension transformed into excitement, bringing me immense relief and joy. Later, Jesse and I visited a real estate agency to finalize the details of our project. We prioritized locations near hospitals for easy medical access for my parents and close to train stations to simplify our daily commutes. During discussions about the house specifics, I noticed my parents were still hesitant about the idea of moving in with us. Thankfully, Jesse offered several insightful suggestions that helped ease the planning process. As we progressed, our dream home began to take shape, and the excitement was palpable. After extensive discussions and considerable online research, we finalized our plans and were ready to consult builders. We were almost there, with the preparations coming together beautifully. I remarked on how building a home was turning out to be far more complicated than I had anticipated. Balancing this project with work was definitely slowing our progress, I said with a sigh. "Absolutely," my husband added, reflecting on the challenges we face. "We've put so much time and effort into these plans, but seeing the results now, it's been worth it. The blueprint we carefully crafted has exceeded all our expectations." We had consulted numerous real estate agents and spent countless hours on research to get to this point. Now, all that was left to do was wait eagerly for the completion of our dream home. It would take some time, but the excitement and anticipation were boundless. As the project advanced, my in-laws began to show more interest. "We heard you're building a new house. Is that right?" they asked one day. "Yes, that's correct. We're hoping to have it finished by the end of the year," I replied. "How wonderful. I'm so impressed with Jess's hard work and how he keeps us updated with all the details," my mother-in-law exclaimed, showing genuine enthusiasm for our endeavor. When she suddenly expressed interest in visiting soon, I was a little surprised but happily agreed. The following weekend, my husband and I made plans to visit their place. They greeted us with warm smiles, and the conversation quickly shifted to our home project. "Building a new house is such a joyous experience, isn't it?" my father-in-law remarked, his voice nostalgic as if recalling his own memories. "Yes, we're thrilled," I said. "We just hope the construction wraps up smoothly so we can move in as soon as possible." We all shared a laugh over the excitement of the journey ahead. My mother-in-law, curious, asked, "Could we see the blueprints?" My husband pulled out his phone and showed them a photo of the design. "Oh, it's quite spacious," she observed. "And so many rooms." "Yes," I nodded. "We'll be living with my parents, so we needed the extra space." I explained the situation, and both my in-laws looked at my husband in disbelief. "You're all moving in together?" they asked, their tone edged with surprise. "Yes," my husband confirmed. Since my parents are getting older, we thought it would be best to live together, so we decided to build a new house. Really? I see, they responded, their tone subtly shifting, revealing a hint of discomfort. Sensing the tension, I quickly changed the subject, hoping to ease the mood. How have you both been? How's your health? We're doing well. No major changes. Just the usual routine, they replied, though it was clear their curiosity about our plans lingered. Tell us more about the new house. Which room will your parents be using? They asked. As my husband pointed to the blueprint and began explaining the layout, I noticed the atmosphere had shifted. While he seemed oblivious to it, I could tell from their tense expressions that the news had unsettled them. Still, we continued discussing the house plans, hoping our shared excitement for this new chapter would eventually put everyone at ease. When my in-laws realized that my parents would be moving in with us, I felt a pang of guilt. I worried they might think we were giving my parents special treatment. Despite this, I hoped they would understand our decision, given my parents' age and needs. Yet it was becoming clear that they were finding it hard to accept. The construction of our new home was progressing smoothly, and with each visit, we could see it nearing completion. My husband often expressed his eagerness to move in quickly, but like him, I felt torn between the excitement of starting this new life and wanting everything to be perfect. Halfway through the construction, my parents came to see the progress. Their joy and gratitude filled me with a deep sense of relief and thankfulness that we could provide them with this new home. At the same time, I began to notice my husband had been visiting his parents more frequently, almost every weekend. Are you planning to visit your parents again this weekend? I asked him one evening. Yeah, I am, he replied. I remarked on how often he had been visiting them since the start of the year, to which he responded, I just want to show them my appreciation. That's why I've been making the effort to visit on my days off. I understood his intentions, recognizing that, like me, he was trying to balance the needs of both our families. I asked, should I come along? I was worried that his parents might feel left out or disappointed, perhaps even hoping they would be the ones moving in with us. I thought visiting them could be a nice gesture of goodwill. However, my husband reassured me, saying, it's all right, I can handle it on my own. With that, he left for his parents' house. I decided to respect his choice and promised to support him whenever he needed it. Time flew by, and before we knew it, our new house was finally ready. On moving day, we loaded the car with boxes, bubbling with excitement as we set off to our new home, eager to start this new chapter together. As we pulled up, the sight of our house took my breath away. I couldn't help but exclaim, wow, our new home. It felt like the start of a brand new adventure. I found myself daydreaming about our life there, cooking meals while watching my husband play with our future child in the yard or hosting family barbecues. These thoughts only heightened my excitement. Just then, my parents called. They were supposed to move in with us, but informed us they would be delayed due to traffic. They urged us to start settling in, but I insisted, we'll wait for you. I planned to share this sentiment with my husband, but to my surprise, his parents showed up unexpectedly. I stared in disbelief as they got out of their car, all smiles, and approached us. Look at this magnificent house. It's impressive enough to show off to our friends. They exclaimed. Yes, it's the house that Jesse and I carefully planned, I replied, feeling a mix of pride and unease. Tiffany, you have excellent taste, my mother-in-law complimented. Well, I suppose, I replied, unsure of how to navigate this unexpected visit. I can give her credit for that, I said, managing a thankful nod. To my astonishment, they began unloading a substantial amount of luggage from their car. Baffled, I quickly asked, mother-in-law, father-in-law, why do you have so much stuff? What are you planning to do? Their reply completely caught me off guard. What do you mean? We're moving our things into this house, they said. You're planning to live here starting today? I asked, my disbelief and frustration mounting. Yes, but you'll need to ask your parents to leave, they continued. Why are you doing this? I inquired, my voice tinged with disbelief. My mother-in-law then explained. As a new bride, it's customary to prioritize your husband's family. The unexpected twist left me struggling to reconcile the joy of our new beginning with the sudden challenge of balancing family expectations against our carefully laid plans. Feeling overwhelmed, I turned to my husband for support as his parents declared they should be the ones moving into the new house. Taking a deep breath, he said, just let your parents know gently. I felt a rush of disbelief. This house was intended for me and my parents. I can't accept this decision, I protested. His response came with visible irritation. Didn't my mom just explain that it's natural for a wife to prioritize her husband's family? We can address your parents' situation later. I was stunned. It was painfully clear that my husband was either heavily influenced by his parents or shared their views, which were now glaringly apparent. Come on, help with the moving, he urged as his parents began unloading their belongings, despite the fact that my parents and I hadn't even set foot inside the house yet. Oh, how wonderful. The interior is just splendid, they exclaimed, eagerly exploring the space. I confronted them. Do you even know whose house this is? They looked at me, clearly taken aback. After a brief pause, they turned to face me and asserted, whose house? Of course, it's Jess's house. Are you suggesting you have a claim to it? I was taken aback by their confidence. Since you and Jesse are living here, he's put so much into building this house, you have no right to make any claims without letting us explain first. It seemed my in-laws had jumped to conclusions and were quick to blame me, indicating that my husband hadn't shared the full details about our financial contributions to the house. Why would your parents live in Jess's house in the first place? They questioned. Yes, it's strange. Poor Jesse having such a demanding wife and parents, they added scornfully. I reached my breaking point. Why am I being criticized for their misunderstandings? If you intend to live here, then Jesse should compensate for the amount spent, I argued, feeling my frustration boil over. I've contributed to this house, I asserted, facing their disbelief. How much are you claiming to have paid? It must be a small amount, maybe $100, they mocked. My husband, looking uncomfortable, remained silent. I turned to him, challenging him. Are you being honest? How high and mighty do you think you are? He hesitated, unsure of what to say next. What are you insinuating? My mother-in-law demanded, her tone authoritative. Noticing my husband's reluctance to address the situation, I decided to clarify things once and for all. I pay for this house entirely with my savings. If you plan to live here, I expect repayment of $460,000 for the cost of the house. My in-laws were visibly shocked, their mouths hanging open and their eyes wide with disbelief. They quickly turned to my husband for confirmation. Jesse, is this true? Did Tiffany buy this house? They asked, struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. My husband nodded slightly, affirming, yes, Tiffany bought the house. She was promoted recently and now earns more than I do. He then admitted something more personal. Even though I've been working for a long time and graduated from a prestigious university, I made a significant mistake at work. I can't be promoted and even took a pay cut. Now I'm earning as much as a new employee. The room fell silent as they processed this news. They never imagined Jesse would be in such a situation. After a moment of stunned silence, their attitude toward me shifted dramatically. Tiffany, we're truly sorry for our earlier comments. We misunderstood everything. Please forgive us and let us stay in this house, they pleaded, their tone full of regret. My husband joined in, bowing deeply. Please, it's my fault for not telling you sooner. Let us stay here with you. Their sudden change in demeanor and plea for forgiveness left me completely taken aback, despite their apologies. I stood firm. No matter how much you plead, I can't accept this. I built this house to live with my parents. If that's not possible, there's no point in keeping it. If you want to live here, you'll need to pay me $460,000. We don't have that kind of money, they replied, their faces falling. Then it seems you'll need to find somewhere else to go, I said, resolute in my decision. Wait, they interjected. We sold our previous home and moved out. As my in-laws realized they could potentially be evicted from our new house, they became desperate. Tiffany, please let us stay. Your parents can live with us too, they pleaded. The thought of living under one roof with both sets of parents seemed unmanageable to me. I can't agree to that. If you sold your house, you must have some funds left. Why not use that to find a flat? Tears welled up in their eyes. The truth is, we lost a significant amount in a bad investment. The money from selling our house and our retirement savings went toward paying off that debt. We have nothing left. I'm retired, and my wife has been a
I'm Emily, and Jake, who is 2 years my senior, is a man of science. living out his childhood dream with a fulfilling research job. Despite his busy schedule, he seems content. Our 3-year-old son, Mike, shares Jake's love for observation and experimentation, currently fixated on the goldfish he snagged at the fall festival. Meanwhile, our 1-year-old daughter, Sarah, is a delightful eater with her adorable chubby white cheeks, bringing comfort and joy to our household. Life is generally good for our ordinary family, except for one recurring concern: dinner. Just as I was trying to soothe my crying daughter and finish preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. Without hesitation, my mother-in-law walked in, a frequent visitor around this time, enough for Mike to hardly glance away from the TV. "My goodness, fried food again," she exclaimed, expressing concern about its impact on Jake's stomach and the grandkids. Mike, however, loves it. My mother-in-law swiftly took charge, offering a creamy vegetable stew and minestrone, enough to last for at least 3 days. As she set the table, my spirits sank at the sight of the mostly carrot and cabbage-filled stew. Interrupting my thoughts, she insisted I pack up the food she brought. Despite its lack of appeal, wasting food was not an option. This routine, familiar since her last unexpected visit, where she swapped my clam chowder for her fried chicken, concluded with her leaving without acknowledging her grandchildren. After she left, my son softly remarked, "Grandma took my fried chicken again." My heart ached at his sad face, but I assured him there was a little meat left. As I heated up the oil, I felt relieved seeing my son's joyful reaction to the promise of more food. Yet beneath the surface, my dissatisfaction lingered. My mother-in-law's intrusion had escalated since my marriage, peaking over the last year. Each week, unannounced during dinner prep, she would criticize my cooking and parenting, leaving her cream stew behind. In the past 6 months, she started taking our food home, undermining our meals. As I juggled baby food and distracted the kids, the tough task of cooking continued. My family's happiness kept me going, but my fried chicken, braised pork, mapo tofu, and hamburgers, all of it, ended up in her hands. I inherited a love for cooking from my restaurant-running family, particularly my dad, who taught me the art. Confident in my culinary skills, I firmly believe that my cooking surpasses my mother-in-law's overly sweet cream stew. However, since Mike, our son, entered the picture, I've found it challenging to assert myself against his grandmother. When Jake, my husband, returns home after the kids have gone to sleep, he grimaces at dinner. With only Mike's share of fried chicken remaining, I served Jake a generous portion of the cream stew, resigned to the fact that it's what my mother-in-law brings over. Frustrated by having my skills undermined, I expressed my discontent to Jake, urging him to tell his mother if he doesn't like it. Jake, as non-committal as ever, pokes at the stew, avoiding confrontation with his mother. Despite her intrusion during Sarah's nap time and taking away Mike's favorite foods, Jake rationalizes it by mentioning her loneliness since his father's passing 2 years ago. I sigh deeply, realizing Jake tends to avoid confrontation when his mother is involved. The only relief is that she hasn't suggested moving in yet. Tired of the routine, my mother-in-law surprises me with a different proposition during one of her dinner visits. She announces that everyone will gather at our place for Christmas this year, a departure from the usual family reunions at her brother-in-law's or her childhood home. Responding with little enthusiasm, I wonder how she plans to host the gathering. She frowns at my apparent lack of understanding and declares that I'll be helping too, assigning me tasks for the 24th. Despite my quick objections, she dismisses my concerns, suggesting I use a baby carrier for Sarah. Not only am I expected to clean up, but I'm also entrusted with preparing the full-course Christmas meal, with a strict warning against repackaging store-bought food or serving anything that tastes bad. Stunned by the audacity of her decision, I try to object, but my mother-in-law, satisfied with her directives, leaves abruptly. When I share the news with Jake that night, he is as bewildered as I am. We contemplate her plans to host a Christmas party, inviting relatives from both his dad's and her sister's families. Frustrated, I finally lose my temper expressing my feelings of always being pushed around. Jake, realizing the severity of the situation, goes silent and, with a resigned sigh, agrees to handle the cleaning and entertaining of relatives. I'm relieved to hear Jake's proposal. It provides some direction. However, he adds a request. Can you still cook the full-course Christmas meal? Jake gazes at the meatloaf his mother-in-law left for us, making it hard to refuse. After some hesitation, I reluctantly agree. Just for this year, let's keep Mom's reputation intact. Plus, everyone in the family loves your cooking, he pleads. Fine, just for this year. Thanks, man. I can't wait for Emily's Christmas feast, he says cheerfully. I brace myself, knowing it's just for this time, and agree to prepare a full-course Christmas meal. When I inform my mother-in-law that Jake will stay over to help with cleaning, she makes a displeased face, commenting on how the man of the house shouldn't do such things. Despite her discontent, she seems reasonably satisfied seeing Jake bustling around at his parents' home for my sake. Then comes Christmas lunchtime. Emily, is the corn soup ready? I'm preparing the croutons now. I respond, scurrying around the kitchen to get the carpaccio and corn soup ready. You're so inefficient. I'll bring the food myself, she declares. I'm sorry. If you're going to complain, try preparing a meal for 20 people. It's really exhausting. Finally, the serving is done, and I sit down at the party. Jake, having put our daughter down for a nap in another room, has been supportive. Preparing a full-course Christmas meal for 20 people was challenging, but it feels good to see everyone enjoying my cooking. However, that good feeling lasts only a moment. This quiche looks so beautiful. It's like something you'd buy. Thank you. Geez, you're good at flattery. This carrot slaw is perfectly balanced with the vinegar. The orange scent really freshens up your mouth. That's because Christmas meals tend to be rich, so I made it a bit more acidic. Something's off. Every time someone tries to compliment my Christmas cooking, mother-in-law interrupts. Something is not right, she declares, revealing the source of this awkwardness. Sophia, father-in-law's sister, comments, Emily, mother-in-law, is such a great cook, isn't she? Confused, I let out a dumbfounded sound. Unperturbed, Sophia continues her story. Did Olivia make this entire Christmas feast? That's amazing. Huh? I haven't cooked a full-course Christmas meal in ages. I was going to leave it to my daughter-in-law, but she's absolutely terrible in the kitchen and never comes by, even when I offer to teach her. Mother-in-law talks about struggles she never even faced, leaving me puzzled. Oh, Emily, you should really take after Olivia while she's still well. Jake might miss the taste of home sometimes, you know. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Daniel, a relative hanging around, laughs as if mocking me. You know, Olivia, that pork belly stew you made last time was delicious. It's amazing you can cook both Western and Japanese dishes. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. Mother-in-law smiles and feigns humility. That pork belly stew was clearly my creation. As I stand there astonished, she mouths, "Go along with it." Apparently, she's been claiming all my dishes, including the Christmas feast, as her own and sharing them with the family. Now she wants me to be complicit in her lie. No way, especially after she's been criticizing my cooking all this time. Though I want to speak out. Overwhelmed by the crowd, I find myself speechless until my young son becomes my unexpected savior. Mom, this omelet is really tasty. It looks different than usual, but your omelets are always good, echoes his high-pitched voice, silencing the noisy adults. Sophia, perhaps out of kindness, attempts to cover for my son, saying, "Oh, Mike, this is actually what your grandmother made." Astonished, my son responds, "Huh? But it's tasty, so it's got to be Mom's omelette." Grandma's omelette is super sweet and gritty. It doesn't taste good. He passionately insists, gesticulating wildly, leaving the adults exchanging puzzled glances. Panic ensues, and the mother-in-law tries to intervene, saying, "Emily, don't teach the child to lie." Excuse me? Who's the one lying here? Mom, am I a liar? Mike looks up at me, his face full of insecurity. That's when I feel my blood boil. Frustrated, I declare, Mike is not a liar. The one lying here is you, Grandma. Ha! She must not have expected me to stand up to her. My mother-in-law looks shocked as I stand up, pointing dramatically at the table. I made this entire Christmas feast, including the corn soup. Everything from start to finish. Naturally, the room erupts in response. My flustered mother-in-law begins to panic and yells, "Wait, wait, wait. Emily, you've been lying this whole time. Have you lost your mind?" "I'm not lying," I assert. Sophia, pulled into this, looks up at me surprised. "Yes, it was delicious. I made that too." You're terrible, stealing credit for Jake's mom's cooking and trying to set her up. "You're the worst daughter-in-law," I accuse. Attempting to defend herself, my mother-in-law hesitates, then shouts, "It's a secret family recipe. I can't tell you in public." The relatives, initially disgusted by our petty fight, start to see who was in the right. But my husband Jake appears near the door, restraining me with a stern voice and face. "Emily, that's enough." My mother-in-law clings to Jake, looking like a tragic heroine. Jake, addressing his mother, says, "Mom, you're the awful one here. This entire Christmas feast Emily made all day while taking care of the kids. Trying to take credit for it is pretty low." Caught in the middle again, Sophia looks at the creamy stew, recalling how sweet it was. "Yeah, it was insanely sweet, wasn't it, Mom?" Seizing the opportunity, Jake reveals, if it's sweet, it's tasty. She's always been cautious about salt and oil, but uses sugar with no limits. So all her dishes taste like a block of sugar. The truth unfolds, exposing mother-in-law's lies. Disillusioned, the family realizes that all the recent dishes were likely made by me, not her. Mother-in-law, exposed for all her lies, panics and tries to appeal to Jake's emotions. "Why are you siding with your daughter-in-law? I'm your mom," she pleads. The revelation leaves everyone in the family disillusioned with the mother-in-law. "I never wanted to say this, Mom. I thought your actions were driven by loneliness since Dad isn't here, so I've been having Emily put up with you. But what you're doing is nothing short of harassment towards her. There's no reason to protect you anymore. Don't see Emily or the kids ever again." Jake, firm in dismissing his begging mother, starts to clean up the Christmas feast. Then he apologizes to the relatives, saying, "I'm sorry for the disturbance this Christmas. Emily, Mike, let's go." As Jake takes Mike's hand and stands up, Mike glances at his grandmother and asks, "Grandma, where's your I'm sorry?" "When you lie, you say I'm sorry, then you get forgiven, right? Isn't that right, Mom?" I get it. You have to be forgiving when it comes to raising kids, but a simple sorry isn't going to cut it." Luckily, I didn't have to worry for even a second. Mother-in-law clenched her lips so tightly they looked like they'd bleed, clearly having no intention of apologizing. Seeing her, Jake sighed as if he had enough. "Grandma can't even say I'm sorry, and she's supposed to be an adult. How sad. Let's go home and have Mom's delicious Christmas feast." Okay. We left behind a growling mother-in-law and confused relatives, carrying our sleeping daughter and the Christmas feast. As we left Mike's house, we went straight to my parents' place and served the Christmas feast. Everyone was delighted and ate with joy. This is what I had been striving for, so my heart was full. Jake, of course, apologized profusely and promised never to let us meet his mother-in-law again. Apparently, the atmosphere at my house remained awkward. His relatives dispersed, leaving only a soulless mother-in-law and some bland food. The next day, mother-in-law's sister and her husband, as well as Jake's sister, visited as promised. Seeing the bland food, they chuckled and said figures. Apparently, mother-in-law's lack of cooking skills was a well-known fact among her relatives. "So, you brag about hosting a Christmas feast. I wondered what magic trick you'd pull, probably just jealous of Emily, who's good at cooking and praised by Jake and Mike." "Sorry for the inconvenience," they said after hearing the details from Jake. "My sister-in-law thanked me for my efforts, and Sophia called to apologize. I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions. It turns out Sophia also enjoys cooking, and we bonded over a recipe for braised pork belly. The misunderstanding with Jake was cleared up, and I found new friends who share my cooking hobby. I felt refreshed, enjoying a carefree Christmas. Of course, mother-in-law wasn't going to back down that easily, but I was well prepared. As I was making cornbread, my phone rang. It was mother-in-law. "Excuse me, where are you?" "It's dinner time. Do your duty as a wife." "Are you making the same mistake and coming over again?" She's furious on the other end of the line. "How dare you? I came here because you didn't apologize. Come home and clear the misunderstanding with our relatives. Then I'll forgive you for embarrassing me." "No thanks." "What? You'll be the one left out by the family." "That won't be a problem." "What, to begin with, the one who put on airs and got shunned by the relatives was mother-in-law. I've even made plans to cook with Sophia next time." "What?" Mother-in-law probably never imagined that I become close to father-in-law's side of the family. So, what now? Still got any moose left? I add another blow to the stunned mother-in-law. Also, I'm not returning to that house. What? Yes, the kids and I have been staying at my parents' house since Christmas. We're planning to find a new place to live now that the holidays are over. Initially, living near Mike's family was mother-in-law's strong insistence, but Jake's workplace is actually closer to my parents' house. Didn't Jake tell you to stay away from daughter-in-law? But since mother-in-law can't listen better than a child, we've decided to physically distance ourselves. Right now, Jake is the only one living there, and he'll leave once he's ready. What? Where? Where are you? Who knows? You think you can get away with not cherishing Jake's mom? Yes, because Jake and sister-in-law have forgiven me. It's okay. Well, wait. What? Thank you for everything so far, mother-in-law. I'm so happy I'll never have to see you again. Goodbye. Wait a minute. With a bit of a laugh, I hang up on mother-in-law, who's screaming like a villain in a superhero show. Then I block her number to make sure I never have to hear her voice again. 2 years later. Mom, what's for dinner today? Hamburgers. Yay! I love Mom's burgers the most in the world. Sarah loves them too. Dad loves them the most in the universe. Dad, that's not fair. My family happily waits for my cooking in the living room, playing around as I fry the burgers in the kitchen. My heart warms up again today, watching them eagerly await my cooking, smiles on their faces.
You had saved up $400,000, hadn't you? I used that money to buy a new house. My mother-in-law, Jane, reported one day that she had bought a house without even mentioning it to me. Furious, I confronted my husband about the situation, but he began to defend his mother, saying, "Let's just let Mom do what she wants. Let's give up on the $400,000. I couldn't let such an act go unpunished and vowed to seek revenge on both of them. My name is Rose. I married Tom 5 years ago, and we both worked at the same food manufacturing company. Our demanding jobs made it hard to spend much time together, but we understood each other and lived peacefully as husband and wife. However, my relationship with my mother-in-law, Jane, was strained from the start. When I first met Tom's family to announce our marriage, Jane had said, 'You're planning to quit your job and support Tom after marrying him, aren't you?' 'No,' I replied. 'I intend to continue working after our marriage. Tom and I have discussed this, and he agrees with my decision to keep working.' Isn't it normal for a bride to quit her job and support her husband at home after getting married?" Jane continued, "When I married my late husband, I quit my job and spent my life as a housewife. I found the notion that a wife should quit her job outdated but couldn't express this to Jane. I could only respond with a tight-lipped smile. 'Is Tom really okay with you continuing to work? When he comes home tired from work and you're not there, it will increase his burden.' 'That's only your opinion, Mom,' Tom said. 'I'm fine with it. Please let Rose do as she pleases.' Thanks to Tom stepping in and stopping his mother, we weren't subjected to any more snide remarks and left his parents' house without further incident. I thanked Tom for standing up for me. If you hadn't intervened, I might have faced more unpleasant comments. My dad passed away, and since then, my mom has been raising me on her own," Tom said. "She probably just worries." Don't think too much about it. I felt fortunate to be married to such a thoughtful person. As we headed back to our apartment, I reflected on how peaceful our life together had been. However, one day, after 5 years of marriage, Tom suggested living with his mother. Hey, we often leave the house empty because of work. How about moving in with my mom? He proposed. Honestly, I don't like that idea, I said. Is that so? Sorry for bringing it up suddenly. Forget I mentioned it. I was taken aback by the suggestion but relieved when Tom quickly accepted my response. We did end up living together, which was a relief. A week later, after Tom's suggestion, I returned home from a long day at work around 9:00 p.m. I was exhausted and muttering to myself as I tried to unlock the door, only to find it already open. Tom usually contacts me when he gets home, but he must have forgotten today. Entering the house, I called out, "I'm home." "Oh, you finally come back," Jane said, appearing in the living room. "Tom hasn't come back yet. He gave me a spare key." What? Tom had given a spare key to his mother without informing me? I was stunned and frozen in place. Jane continued, "Don't just stand there. Can you prepare dinner? I've been waiting for you to come back." Mom, haven't you eaten yet?" I asked, bewildered. "Yes," she replied, as if it was perfectly normal for her to enter my house uninvited and expect dinner. Her audacity was astonishing. I was reluctant to confront Jane directly, but I couldn't just ignore her. "Is that so? All right, I can only make something simple. Is that okay with you?" I said, noticing some ingredients were missing. It felt like the fridge was more empty than it had been when I checked yesterday. "Something easy is fine. Please hurry up. I'm hungry." "Please wait a moment. I'll prepare it right away," I responded, trying to accommodate her request. I quickly prepared a meal and served it to Jane. "Thank you. I'll eat now," she said. After taking a sip of the miso soup I made, Jane remarked, "What is this? It doesn't taste good." I was taken aback. Did she really just say my miso soup wasn't good? "It doesn't taste good. Didn't you hear me?" Jane's criticism was unmistakable. "It seems you can only make such meals because you're always busy with work," Jane continued. "You should quit your job and focus on the household." "But Tom says he likes the meals I cook," I countered. "That must be flattery. Can't you even understand that?" she snapped. It was clear she disapproved of my working after marriage. For the next hour, Jane continued to make snide remarks. "I'll be visiting often from now on, so make sure you take care of the house properly," she said before leaving in a seemingly good mood after airing her grievances. About 30 minutes later, Tom came home. "Hey, did you give a spare key to your mom?" I asked. "Oh, yeah, I did," Tom replied. I was surprised to see her suddenly at our place today. After making her dinner, she said it was bad. "Well, these things happen. Don't worry about it," Tom said casually. "What kind of attitude is that?" I protested. "She suddenly shows up, mocks the food I made, and you're telling me to just endure it. This all started because you gave her the spare key." Tom's temper flared. "If you had agreed to live with her, it would have been better. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. I don't need dinner. Am I to blame? You were the one who agreed to this," I said, feeling heartbroken by his response. The next day and the day after, the situation didn't improve. The room is messy and it doesn't look like you've cleaned properly. The laundry is all wrinkled and unsightly, Jane complained every time she visited. Her frequent visits and constant dissatisfaction were becoming unbearable. I might have been able to tolerate her remarks, but a week after she started visiting often, it felt like my patience was wearing thin. I noticed something strange. The food supplies were dwindling again, and the detergent we had stocked up on was also missing. Our apartment and my in-laws' house are only a 10-minute walk apart, and it was clear that the daily disappearance of food and household items was abnormal. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it seemed Jane might be taking them without permission. One day, when she came over, I decided to confront her, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. "Mom, you haven't been taking our food and household items without asking, have you?" Jane admitted it without hesitation. "Oh, you found out, have you? It's not a problem for me to take things from my son's house. You're not home because of work, and it would be a waste if the food went bad." I was taken aback by her nonchalant attitude. How could she be so calm and unapologetic? I thought, indeed, it was Tom's house too, but that didn't justify her actions. "Speaking of which," Jane continued, "I should mention that you saved up $400,000, didn't you?" I used that money to buy a new house. What are you talking about? I asked, confused. There's no need to pretend you don't know. You had it saved in a bank book, right? I was surprised by how much was in it when I opened it. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. She used $400,000 of my savings to buy a house without anyone's permission, but you shouldn't have been able to withdraw the money with just the bank book. How did you get the PIN? Oh, you had the PIN written on a note inside the bank book, didn't you? Jane said with a smirk. I found it quite easily. I guess I should thank you for making it so accessible. I had let my guard down, thinking no one would look into my bank book. Indeed, I had put a note inside to remember the PIN. I was looking for a better living environment, and this worked out perfectly, Jane said, laughing as she left my house. Her actions were unforgivable. Using someone else's money without permission was beyond reprehensible. I told Tom about how his mother used my money to buy a house, but his response was infuriating. He acted as if it were none of his concern and said, "Let Mom do what she wants. Just forget about the $400,000. His dismissive attitude was the last straw. My patience with both him and Jane had worn thin, and I couldn't tolerate any more of their behavior. I decided it was time for some revenge. The next day, I invited Jane over to our house under the pretense of discussing the situation. Before she arrived, I discreetly activated the voice recorder on my mobile phone to gather evidence. Yesterday, you mentioned using $400,000 from my bank book without permission to buy a new house. Is that true? I asked her. Yes, it's true, Jane confirmed. I've already paid the down payment and construction has started. With the bank book, it's as good as bought. But just having the bank book doesn't mean anything, I pressed. How did you plan to withdraw the money? Jane smiled sweetly and said, I have the seal, don't I? So you took the seal without permission as well? I asked. Mom, that would be considered theft. Say whatever you want, Jane retorted. I never imagined someone who barely does any housework had saved up so much. At least it's somewhat useful. Fine, you can have the bank book, I said, trying to keep my composure. Thank you for coming today. I wanted to confront Jane in anger and reclaim the bank book and seal, but I restrained myself. I had secured evidence of Jane's theft and let her leave. Enjoy it while it lasts, Jane, I thought. The following day, I called Jane again to retrieve what was stolen. Mom, I don't mind giving you the bank book, but it seems personal identification is needed to withdraw the money. I'll go to the bank to withdraw it, so could you please bring the bank book and seal? All right, Jane agreed. I'll bring them over. I hung up the phone, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. I had no intention of withdrawing the $400,000. In this day and age, you can't access such a large amount of money without proper identification. Jane's naivety was astonishing. She seemed completely oblivious to the gravity of her actions, blinded by the lure of easy money. After retrieving the bank book and seal from Jane, I went straight to the police station. I need to report a crime, I said. Jane took my bank book and seal without permission and intends to use them to buy a new house. So, you're not the one making the purchase? The officer asked. No, it wasn't me. My bank book and seal were stolen. I'd like to file a report. The police took my statement seriously and accepted the report. That evening, when Tom came home, I informed him about the police report. I went to the police because your mother stole my bank book and seal. She might get arrested soon, I said. What? Why would my mom get arrested? Tom asked, sounding shocked. Because what she did is a serious crime. Just because you say, let Mom do what she wants doesn't mean I have to tolerate her stealing from me, I replied. You didn't have to involve the police, Tom said defensively. Am I supposed to stay silent while she commits a crime just because she's a relative by marriage? I didn't save up all this money just to hand it over to Jane. Tom's face flushed with anger. So now you're calling my mother an old hack? That's enough, I said. I'm not going to let her get away with this. Tom stormed off to his room, only to return moments later with a divorce form. I never thought you'd say something like that. Sign this, he demanded. I was taken aback that he had a divorce form ready, but I was equally resolute. If this is how you feel, I'll sign it. Just get it over with, I said. Tom seemed surprised by my willingness to sign so quickly. After I completed the paperwork, he took the form and left. I showed Tom the divorce form. There should be no problem now. I'll submit this to the city hall myself, I said. It was clear he wanted to avoid facing me any longer. After our conversation, Tom quickly left the house, despite the late hour, likely heading to his mother's place. About 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Hello?" I answered. "It's Tom," came the voice on the other end. "I told Mom that Rose filed a police report. Could you withdraw it?" "No way," I said firmly. "Even if she's pretending to be remorseful, it doesn't change anything. I won't forgive her. She's likely to do this again." Another call came in. "Hello?" I asked, annoyed. "I'm sorry," said a tearful voice. It wasn't Tom's but Jane's. She was crying and apologizing, but her tears did nothing to soften my stance. "You think crying and apologizing will make me forgive you? You took not only the bank book but also the seal. How do you explain that?" "I've always wanted a single-family home," Jane explained. "After living in apartments for so long, I couldn't resist using the money. I know it was wrong, but I've been managing our finances and saw the $400,000. I couldn't help myself." "That doesn't excuse anything," I replied coldly. "I worked hard for that money before I even married your son. You can't just make it right by apologizing. Reflect on this in prison." Jane tried to make another appeal. "Please, I have a request." "A request? Now? How audacious. What is it?" "I've already paid a $100,000 down payment for my savings, and I can't stop the construction. Could you lend me the $400,000, promising to repay it without fail?" "Are you delusional?" I responded. "There's no way I'm lending you anything. I can't trust someone who steals not just a bank book but also food and household items to repay me." "What should I do then?" Jane asked, desperation evident in her voice. "That's your problem to figure out. I'm not responsible for cleaning up your mess. Why don't you ask your son to take out a loan?" Jane's panic was almost amusing, but I had no sympathy left. Just as I was about to end the call, Tom intervened. "Please don't abandon Mom. You were taken care of by her too. Even if it's not the full amount, please help her." "Taken care of? She comes over every day just to criticize and has a spare key but doesn't help around the house." "What care did she give me?" I countered. Tom had no response, clearly grasping at straws in a desperate attempt to appeal to my emotions. "I won't help at all. Good luck." "Wait, I'll take care of Mom so she won't be a burden to you. Can we cancel the divorce?" Tom pleaded. "It's too late for that now," I said. "Your mother is clearly the most important thing to you. You never protected me. I'm done. Enjoy your time with her. We'll be strangers by tomorrow." I hung up, turning off my phone to avoid more calls. Tom didn't return that night. They were probably comforting each other, and I was left to deal with the aftermath. I took a day off work to submit the divorce papers to City Hall. With that, Tom and I became strangers. Whatever happened to his mother was no longer my concern. During the 3 days leading up to my move, Tom and I barely spoke. I didn't initiate any conversation either. I planned to stay at my parents' house, an hour's commute from work, which was manageable. As I left the house that Tom and I had shared, he said, "I'm sorry for everything." I ignored him and walked out. It was a surprising end to a marriage that had once been filled with love. Yet strangely, I felt no sadness, only relief at being free from such a terrible mother and son. I couldn't forgive the hurtful words and actions. This outcome was a direct result of Tom's neglect and his constant prioritization of his mother over me. If he had taken a firm stand against her when she used my bank book to buy a house, perhaps I might have reconsidered. Jane and Tom had underestimated me. I wasn't going to end this passively. They would now face the burden of loan repayments, which was precisely what Jane wanted. They were both accountable for their actions. I reflected on this as I drove to my parents' house. A week later, the police contacted me to inform me that Jane had been arrested on suspicion of theft. It turned out that not living with her had been a decisive factor in her arrest. Had I lived with my mother-in-law, the case might have been considered theft among relatives, making an arrest difficult. I was relieved and thanked the police before ending the call. Jane would now have the chance to truly reflect on her crimes in prison. Just then, Tom called. "Hello. My mom got arrested." "I know. The police just informed me," I said. "With her gone, there's no way I can pay off the loan by myself. So what do you want from me?" "Are you asking for my help?" he replied. "No. Don't call me anymore," I said and hung up. To ensure he couldn't contact me again, I blocked his number and messages. A month later, a coworker told me something surprising. "Hey, did you hear? Tom quit the company." Tom and I worked at the same company, though we were in different departments, so we didn't interact much. With news of his mother's arrest spreading within the company, it seemed Tom found it too difficult to stay. I had no involvement in spreading the gossip and had no idea what happened to him afterward, but he was likely struggling with the loan repayments. 3 years later, I remarried someone I met completely outside of work, someone who truly values me. My new in-laws have welcomed me warmly, and I cherish them in return. I finally feel I've found true happiness and hope never to experience anything like before again.
Oh no, my bank book is missing. I distinctly remember placing it at the back of this drawer. Could it be them? Despite supporting my eldest son and his wife, who have been living together for several years, they've ignored me for 3 years without even saying thank you. I simply wanted them to show a little gratitude. But it's okay now. I will never forgive them. I'm a 56-year-old retiree, having left my job to care for my unstable mother-in-law. Currently, I work from home while providing care. Although I was a few years away from retirement, I couldn't leave my mother-in-law living alone, so I decided to live with her. My husband is away on business and comes home once a month at best. But when he does, he brings lots of vegetables and Japanese sweets that my mother-in-law likes. Thank you. I'm so grateful for everything you do for me. I wish I could have fed your father too. My mother-in-law says every time she expresses her gratitude to us. My father-in-law passed away over 10 years ago from cancer, unable to eat his favorite foods in the end. My mother-in-law often regrets not having done tests earlier, and she wishes she could have fed him the delicious foods she eats now. My mother-in-law's condition varies greatly from day to day. Some days she's bedridden and barely eats, while on other days, she's energetic and goes for a walk by herself. Her unpredictable behavior often surprises me, but as long as she enjoys her days, I'm happy to watch over her. However, there's a troublesome event that occurs 2 or 3 times a month for both my mother-in-law and me. It's when my eldest son and his wife from the neighborhood show up. Mom, Grandma, long time no see. Were you well? We're starving. Can you make something to eat right away? Sorry to intrude, mother-in-law. I'm hungry, so please hurry, they demand. Tom and Catherine, who got married a year ago, frequently visit our house like this, appearing suddenly and even asking for pocket money. They seem to know when the mother-in-law's pension comes in. Hey, Grandma, today's the day your pension comes in, right? Sorry, but could you donate a little to us, the less fortunate? I think to myself, it's starting again. Every time. They don't leave until they get the money. Tom, enough is enough. What about your job? Aren't you working? Stop begging for Grandma's precious pension. However, my attempts to intervene usually end in a quarrel. I relay everything to my husband, who's away on business. He just sighs in exasperation, muttering about what a troublemaker our son is for not holding a steady job. What is he even doing? Just got married. And he's already hopeless, my husband remarks. Though he scolds our son over the phone, it seems to have no effect. This constant cycle of their visits leaves my mother-in-law and me exhausted, losing the will to do anything else. I'm tired, really. It's like they drain all my energy, I confess. Initially, we'd endured their visits, thinking it was only 2 or 3 times a month. But their frequency increased, adding to our stress. Then, in the middle of a weekday, my son suddenly arrived home. I got fired from my job, and for a while, I want to live here, he announced. He had been repeatedly absent without leave, even losing a USB containing important company data. Initially facing a pay cut, he ended up fighting with his boss and getting fired. Despite being clearly at fault, he seemed unrepentant. Seriously, none of them even do their jobs properly and act all high and mighty. That's why I hate people who act like they're elite, my son grumbled. He declared his intention to move in next week, dismissing our concerns about his grandmother's health. Despite my attempts to refuse, he remained stubborn, insisting that his decision was final. Faced with his determination, I couldn't help but sigh. If my husband were here, he would sternly scold them and send them away, but I can't stand up to them alone. Hey, Emily, is Tom moving in here? If so, should I go to a facility? I'll be in the way. And those kids aren't even working, my mother-in-law fretted. Don't worry about such things, mother-in-law. I'll make sure Tom gets a job, and he'll be leaving soon, I reassured her. I feel terribly sorry for making my elderly mother-in-law worry like this. We doted on our only son, but we never intended to raise him to be so unreasonable. The son I knew was kind and considerate, but he clearly changed after meeting his wife, Catherine. To ease my mother-in-law's worries, I offer her assurance. I reassured my mother-in-law, "You don't have to worry about anything. I intend to take good care of you." I repeated my explanation several times, and gradually the tension on her face eased. However, the day my son and his wife moved in arrived sooner than expected. Despite having separate bedrooms, we rearranged the rooms to share one, as my mother-in-law felt insecure being alone. Her desire to share a room highlighted her anxiety. Unfortunately, their behavior from the first day was appalling. "Hey, Mom, we're planning to use the entire second floor for our room. That's okay, right? From today, the second floor bathroom is ours only. You guys don't come upstairs, okay? We're still technically newlyweds, and we don't want unnecessary people coming and going, so please understand," my son announced. They even moved all the stuff from my workroom to the hallway on the same day, leaving me speechless. It became clear that if I stayed silent, they would continue to do and say whatever they wanted. My son added, "Mom, the mortgage on this house is still ongoing, right? I don't plan to pay rent until I find a job, nor do I intend to pay for groceries or utilities. So take care of it." Feeling increasingly irritated, I reluctantly responded, "Ah, I see." From then on, I was ignored by my son and his wife. A week passed since they moved in, and there were no signs of my son job hunting. His wife left dirty dishes unwashed, neglected laundry, and they freely used our car without asking, leaving it full of trash and low on gas without refueling. Overwhelmed with responsibilities, my mother-in-law, who should be relaxing, ended up helping with the housework. Realizing this was wrong, I confronted my son. "Tom, are you even job hunting? You can't just stay at home all the time. Do something, at least clean up your dishes." However, he continued to ignore me. Complaining to his wife, he said, "Lately, I've been hearing these hallucinations. Just now, I heard something about job hunting or whatever. We have a place to live and food to eat, so why work? Stupid." They laughed about it, referring to my mother-in-law and me as hallucinations and ghosts. Despite our frustration, my mother-in-law and I decided to let them be for a bit longer, believing our chance for payback would come eventually. We constantly talked about them when they weren't around, discussing our options to get them out of the house and make them regret their actions. Sharing a bedroom, we spent the entire day excitedly discussing our plan in this challenging situation. I might have succumbed to depression if I were facing this alone, but being together makes it feel like we can get through it. Almost 3 years have passed since they moved in, and it's been 3 years since they started ignoring us. Perhaps they think we're ghosts. True, they haven't paid a penny for rent or living expenses. Their savings must be running out soon, right? Indeed, they might be covering their cell phone bills and dining out, but I've heard they're estranged from Catherine's parents, so financial help seems unlikely. They may ignore us now, but surely they'll come to us for help once they run out of money. We decided that's when we'll take our revenge. It was 2 weeks after that conversation when we were busy preparing for my mother-in-law's clinic visit. I noticed my son acting fidgety since morning, not seeming hungry but searching for something. Knowing he would ignore me if I spoke, I pretended not to notice and left for the hospital. Upon returning home, I discovered my son and his wife were gone, and my bank book was missing. Thinking the worst, I went to check my bedroom. Oh no, my bank book is missing. I'm sure I put it in the back of this drawer. Could it be them? I thought. It was too much, even criminal. My mother-in-law came and asked, "Emily, What's wrong? You look pale. Did something happen? So, I told her that Tom and Catherine stole my bank book. They took the bank book that was kept here. The house mortgage is $2,000 a month, and on top of that, I've been supporting my son and his wife who haven't paid a penny. This is the result. I didn't expect them to say thank you, but I at least wanted them to show some gratitude. But it's okay now. I will never forgive them. Despite the theft, according to my online banking, no money had been withdrawn from the account yet. I rushed to the bank to close the account. They were mistaken if they thought they could withdraw cash with just the bank book without knowing the PIN and without the seal. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became at my son and his wife. I informed my husband about the stolen bank book, and he said, "It's over. We can disown them for all I care." My mother-in-law suggested reporting to the police, but we decided to leave the house as quickly as possible, making it our last resort. I couldn't let them run wild anymore and refused to be taken advantage of. Despite feeling sorry for the sudden upheaval, we chose to stay at a hot spring inn until the problem was resolved. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. I'll work on resolving this issue quickly, so please bear with it here for a while. Don't worry about me. Besides, I'm happy to stay at such a luxurious inn. At that moment, I resolved that once this problem was settled, I would definitely find a comfortable new home for my mother-in-law. A few days later, after completing various procedures, I finally had a moment to relax. Then, unexpectedly, I received a call much sooner than I had anticipated, and of course, the caller was my son. "Hello, Mom. You haven't been home lately. Are you on a trip? Grandma's not there either, so I was just wondering what happened and got worried," he said, his voice clearly trembling and upset. It's odd, isn't it? He ignored me for 3 years, yet now he can talk when he's in trouble. What's the matter? This is the first time you've spoken to me in 3 years. Do you need something? By the way, I have no business with you guys. Don't say that, please. I don't understand, but we received a notice to vacate the house by the end of the month. It's our own house, so what's going on? He explained. The real estate agent, outraged by our story, had swiftly proceeded with the paperwork, sending the eviction notice within 2 days. Impressed by the real estate agent's prompt action, I decided to reveal the truth to my son. "Ah, that house. I sold it because I thought it was no longer needed, and it seems the new buyer wants you to leave soon." "What? Even if you say that, we have nowhere to live. Where are you and Grandma now?" "Well, come there," my son pleaded, still trying to use us even in this situation. Enough is enough, I thought. Why are you crying to me now? What a pathetic man. You freeloaded for 3 years, ignoring me and Grandma. Isn't that a bit too convenient? Just so you know, I intend to cut ties with you. Your father agrees with this decision. Don't say that, please. I didn't mean it. I wanted to get along with you and Grandma, and I'm looking for a job too. My son replied, spilling lies that astonished both my mother-in-law and me. If he had shown genuine remorse, we might have reconsidered, but he had already crossed the line by stealing the bank book. By the way, you stole my bank book from the bedroom, didn't you? What were you planning to do with it? You thought as long as you got the money, everything would be fine, right? Lying won't do you any good. No, that's not. I could tell from the other end of the phone that my son was on the verge of tears. Then, realizing my son was useless, his wife took the phone. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? Kicking your son and his wife out of their house. Doesn't your heart ache? Are you a demon?" Just as I anticipated what she would say next, my daughter-in-law unleashed a barrage of hysterical insults. She went so far as to claim, "You're just living off Grandma's pension too. You're no different from Tom, acting all high and mighty without a job." I was so shocked that I froze for a moment, mouth hanging open. "Joeless, do you think I could pay off the mortgage of that big house if I were jobless? I've been paying $2,000 every month, and for your information, I'm not jobless," I retorted. It felt pointless to reveal the truth. Her level of unawareness was apparent. In reality, I earned about $5,000 a month from my remote work. Still, I saw no need to share these details with them. If they had seen the bank book's contents, they might have figured it out. But hey, Catherine, you're jobless too. Yet you always wear branded items. Where did you get those? I think the one acting strange here is you, I pointed out. I suspected, though couldn't confirm, that she was in debt, always carrying new designer bags and wallets. Even my son, before being fired, worked at a decent company and earned a fair salary. It seemed like she was the one who ruined everything. I have no intention of prying into your private affairs, but if you're in debt, you'd better deal with it quickly before things get out of hand. Also, please leave that house as soon as possible. I'll take my leave now. Despite having more to say, I decided to let them face their impending doom on their own. After hanging up, I ignored all the apology emails from my son. My husband, who had also been contacted, dismissed them with even colder words than I did. We have been ignored until now, but it was our turn to ignore them. They should thoroughly enjoy their hellish lives. A few months later, I heard that the couple had moved out of the house into a shabby apartment. Catherine had accumulated a significant amount of debt. Although my son tried to initiate a divorce, they decided to repay the debt together since it was also in his name. With both of them jobless, they struggled to repay and were now busy working while being chased by debt collectors. Their hellish life continued, but they should try their best to overcome it. As for me, I'm currently considering a house to live in with my mother-in-law. My husband is likely to return from his business trip soon, so we're planning to live together in a comfortable house, enjoying a peaceful and happy life.
One night during our honeymoon, I suddenly woke up to overhear my husband engaged in a secretive and disturbing phone conversation. Trembling with anxiety, I carefully peered at his phone and discovered something shocking. Realizing the gravity of the situation, I took his passport, packed my things, and flew back to New York alone, planning my next move against him. Upon my return, I was approached by a mysterious individual. "My name is Kate," she introduced herself. "I work at an office in New York. I met your husband through a mutual friend. After a few dinners and realizing our chemistry, we married following a year of dating. Yuan is handsome and kind-hearted, but there was something that had been troubling me. My concern began as our wedding approached. Normally, Yuan came home later than I did, but one day when my overtime extended and I returned late, something felt off. I noticed a pair of women's shoes next to Yuan's work shoes, shoes that didn't belong to me. Suspicion grew as I overheard a conversation between a man and a woman. Though I couldn't catch all of it, Yuan's unmistakable voice and the woman's cheerful tone fueled my worries. I quickly activated the video function on my smartphone and entered the living room, only to find Yuan and my mother-in-law there. "Oh, you're back. Welcome home, Kate," Yuan said, his tone apologetic. I was relieved to see my suspicions about infidelity were unfounded, but then another surprise awaited me. The room was filled with stacked cardboard boxes. Confused, I asked, "What's with all these boxes? What's going on?" "We're packing for a move," Yuan explained. "Mom is helping." "Moving where?" I asked, my head spinning. "You didn't mention anything about moving." "Oh, I assumed that after getting married, moving into our house was the next step," Yuan's mother said nonchalantly. "I wasn't informed of any plans to live with your parents," I protested. "This sudden change disrupts my vision of our married life. I can't agree to such unilateral decisions." My mother-in-law's response was casual. "Isn't it normal to live together after marriage? If that's an issue, you might as well consider divorce." Her words cut deeply. "It's easier for both of us to live here, especially if you ever need anything. It's a win-win," Yuan added. Feeling cornered between Yuan and his mother, I reluctantly agreed to move into their home. The transition proved incredibly stressful. Yuan's attachment to his mother became even more apparent. He constantly referenced her opinions, and most of the household chores were still managed by her. Whenever I cooked, he'd comment that Mom's cooking tastes better. It seemed my mother-in-law took pleasure in this dynamic, and my father-in-law remained silently observant, never engaging with me. I often felt undervalued in the house. What bothered me most was my mother-in-law's extravagant spending habits. The situation was more challenging than I had anticipated, and the strains on our marriage began to show. I soon realized that my mother-in-law had a penchant for luxury brand items, buying them eagerly whenever a new release caught her eye. Each time a new product was announced, she would ask me, "I want this, but I'm short on money. Can you lend me some?" Although I thought to myself that if she didn't have the money, she shouldn't buy it, I couldn't object since she handled all the housework. As a result, the savings I had accumulated since my student days were dwindling. When I brought this up to my husband, he simply said, "We're allowed to live here, so don't complain." While I didn't actively choose to live in this house, there was a reason I stayed. Deep down, I knew my husband genuinely respected me. On our days off, he always made an effort to spend quality time with me and had even planned our honeymoon in advance. Despite the difficulties of living with his family, his love kept me going. Finally, our much-anticipated honeymoon arrived. We were heading to Italy, a destination I had always dreamed of visiting for its authentic cuisine. My husband had made this dream a reality, and the excitement of traveling abroad with the person I loved most made my heart race. However, our eagerly awaited adventure took a drastic turn one night. Late into the evening, I woke up to use the bathroom and noticed that my husband was not beside me. Assuming he might be up for the same reason, I left the bedroom and overheard him on the phone. Who could he be calling at this hour? As I listened closely, a chilling statement reached my ears. "By this time tomorrow, Kate will be long gone to the afterlife. Don't worry, Mom. I won't mess up. I'll call you later." The voice on the phone seemed to be his mother's, and the implication of what he said about me being in the afterlife sent a shiver down my spine. Fearful that he might notice me, I hurriedly pretended to be asleep. When my husband returned to bed and soon fell into a deep sleep, I quietly took his smartphone and went to the bathroom. His phone wasn't locked, making it easy for me to access. Although I knew snooping was wrong in this potentially life-threatening situation, I felt it was necessary. I couldn't resist the urge to investigate further. I opened his messaging app and read through his conversation with his mother. The messages revealed a chilling plan. He intended to kill me for the insurance money, which his mother would then use to splurge on luxury brands. The blood drained from my face as the horrifying reality sunk in. My husband had always been somewhat of a mama's boy, but I had never imagined he would scheme with his mother like this. In a panic, I took a screenshot of their messages and lay back on the bed. Even with my eyes closed, the overwhelming fear made it impossible to sleep. The night dragged on, and when morning arrived, bringing the usual buzz of trains and people starting their day, I knew I had to get out of there. I quickly gathered my belongings, deciding to leave the hotel and head home. As I packed my suitcase, I noticed my husband's passport on the table. A sudden idea struck me. I would leave him stranded abroad. I grabbed the passport and rushed out, heading straight to the airport. Ignoring his numerous calls, I boarded a flight back to New York. Once home, I began preparing for my retaliation. I knew I couldn't return to the house where I lived with his parents, so I found a reasonably priced hotel in New York. I started collecting additional evidence and contacting lawyers. Whenever his parents were out, his mother at her craft class and his father golfing, I would sneak into their house to retrieve my belongings. My husband's relentless attempts to contact me went unanswered as I ignored them completely. One day, while packing my things at his parents' house, I thought I had a couple of hours before they would return. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Kate, is that you?" I jumped, startled to find my father-in-law standing there. He wasn't supposed to be back so early. Our honeymoon was supposed to last until today. My presence there was unexpected, and I struggled to come up with an explanation. Should I tell him the truth about why I returned to New York? But what if he was involved in the plan with my husband? As I was on the verge of panicking, my father-in-law suggested, "How about we go somewhere else to talk, like a nearby cafe?" To my surprise, he made this offer, likely because his wife would be returning soon. I agreed, and we headed to the cafe. "Why are you here in the middle of your honeymoon? Is Ewan back?" he asked once we were seated. I hesitated, unsure whether he was involved in their scheme. If he was, revealing my plan for revenge would be futile. "Didn't your wife mention anything to you?" I asked cautiously. After a moment of thought, he replied, "She hasn't said a word to me." His expression suggested genuine confusion. Relieved, I decided to explain everything. "Do you know about this plan?" I handed him the printed messages between my husband and his mother. His eyes widened as he read them. I've seen them talking together a few times, but I had no idea they were plotting something like this, he admitted. It was clear he was genuinely unaware of their scheme. I told him how I had overheard my husband's conversation with his mother in Italy, which led me to discover their plan. The shock drove me to return to New York alone. I see. I'm deeply sorry that my wife was involved in something like this, he said. There's no need to apologize, father-in-law. It's not your fault, I reassured him. As for the future, I'm truly sorry, but I'm considering ending my marriage with Yuan. That's your decision, Kate. I want you to make the choice that's right for you. I'm at a loss for words about all this, he said. Afterwards, my father-in-law continued to apologize. Up until now, I had only sensed a distant atmosphere from him and worried that he might not think well of me. But seeing his genuine concern and sincerity, I began to believe this was his true nature. I couldn't reconcile how someone as kind-hearted as my father-in-law could have such a problematic wife and son. As I pondered this, he shared an incident with me. Kate, did my wife ask you for money to buy luxury brand items? He asked. Yes, she did, I admitted. It might be partly my fault. How so? He asked. When we were newlyweds, I gave her an expensive designer bag for her birthday. Since then, she seemed obsessed with branded goods. I wish she'd choose items more appropriate for her age, he explained. I didn't realize she even borrowed money to buy them. I got really angry with her for that, and I thought she had understood. I never imagined she would try to get money from you. I must have underestimated her. He bowed his head in apology. I had never understood my mother-in-law's obsession with branded items. But even if that was a factor, I couldn't forgive her actions. It's not your fault, father-in-law, I said. She continued her behavior even after you warned her. It's her own issue. That's comforting to hear, he replied. By the way, where's Yuan? Didn't he come back with you? I hesitated. How would he react if he knew his son was stranded abroad? I had to be honest now. The truth is, I took Yuan's passport with me, so he might not be able to return for a while, I confessed. I know it was a drastic move, but it was the only way to ensure no one interfered with my preparations. My father-in-law looked shocked at first, but then he chuckled. I see. Given the situation, it might have been unavoidable. That's why he said that. Wait, what did he say? I asked. Well, I overheard my wife talking to Yuan on the phone on the day you returned to New York. Yuan seemed a bit flustered by your absence but mentioned that it might actually make our plan work. At that moment, I didn't understand, but now it makes sense, he said. If that's the case, I'll support you too. That would be very helpful, I said. As we chatted, catching up on everything that had happened so far, my smartphone rang unexpectedly. It was Yuan. He must have realized his passport was missing while preparing to return home and decided to call. I answered the call. Hello. Kate, finally, you picked up. Where are you? I've been worried sick because I couldn't reach you. I'm glad to hear you're okay, Yuan said, his voice filled with concern. I'm relieved you're okay too, I replied. I'm sorry. The truth is, I received an urgent message from my parents and had to return to New York immediately, I explained. I was so rushed that I didn't have time to contact you. I see, Yuan said, but do you know where my passport is? Actually, because I had to leave in such a hurry, I accidentally took your passport with me, I admitted. What am I supposed to do now? Yuan asked, sounding frustrated. If it's alright with you, I think it would be faster for you to get your passport reissued there rather than waiting for me to send it, I suggested. Reissue it, Yuan said, exasperated. You know I can't take any more time off from work. I'll contact your workplace and explain the situation, I assured him. I'll also inform my in-laws. I'll handle it from here. Okay, I trust you. I'm truly sorry for the trouble. Please take care and come back safely, Yuan said. I ended the call and took a deep breath. My quick thinking had helped manage the situation. Thanks to my father-in-law's assistance, the process of moving our belongings and handling the divorce proceedings went smoothly. The day finally came for my husband to return. His passport had been reissued without issue, and he came home with my mother-in-law who had picked him up from the airport. I'm back, Yuan announced. I didn't expect such a mess at the end. Really, it's Kate's fault. She needs to be more careful. My mother-in-law, having heard the story from Yuan, grumbled in annoyance. Perhaps she was displeased because my early return had disrupted some of her plans. While I had my own grievances to address, I kept my focus on the upcoming situation, considering these matters trivial in comparison. When Yuan and my mother-in-law arrived, my father-in-law, with a stern look on his face, said, "Sorry to bother you right after you got home, but come here." He then led them to the living room. "Please have a seat," I said, motioning to my husband and mother-in-law. They looked slightly startled, but complied and sat down quietly. I fixed my gaze on them and began, "You must be tired from the trip, but there's something important we need to discuss." "Important?" my husband asked, his confusion evident. "What are you talking about?" "I'll get straight to the point," I said, my voice steady. "Yuan, I want a divorce." "What? A divorce?" Yuan blinked rapidly, clearly taken aback. "Kate, what are you talking about? You left our son in Italy, and now you want a divorce just as you're back? This is incomprehensible and thoughtless." "Thoughtless?" I retorted. "Isn't that what you two are being?" "What did you say?" my mother-in-law exclaimed, her eyes widening in shock. "Do you really have no awareness? What is this supposed to mean? Can you please explain?" I handed her a printout of a messaging app screen. "This is a conversation between you and my husband, discussing your outrageous plans." "What's this? Anyone could fake something like this," she scoffed. "Plans and evidence don't mean anything if they're made up." "If this alone isn't enough," I said, placing a voice recorder on the table, "how about this?" I pressed play, and the recorded conversation began. The recording clearly captured my husband and mother-in-law discussing how their plans were thwarted by my unexpected return to New York and their subsequent disappointment. "I managed to record this thanks to my father-in-law," I explained. "My mother-in-law is hard of hearing and always uses speaker mode, making her calls loud and clear. My father-in-law took the initiative to record their conversation. This should be hard to argue against, don't you think?" "Wait a minute," Yuan said, his voice tense. "Kate, it's not like that. Please just wait." "I just acted out of necessity for my mother," Yuan said, his voice earnest. "I never really wanted any of this. But she said she needed money for luxury items, and I couldn't bear to see her sad. Now I realize I don't want a divorce. Let's leave this house and start a new life together, just the two of us. How about that?" I sighed deeply, struggling to keep my frustration in check. "What kind of thought process leads to such optimism?" I asked. "You should really stop calling her mom all the time. It doesn't sit well with me. I appreciate your care for your mother, but plotting to get rid of your wife for insurance money to buy her gifts is beyond comprehension. Living with someone like that? No way. Just the thought gives me a headache." Yuan seemed unprepared for my response and was at a loss for words. "I'm going to divorce you no matter what," I continued firmly. "I'll be demanding the division of property from both of you and also asking for reimbursement for the luxury items I bought for your mother in the past. But if you do that, I won't be able to buy any more bags or watches," my mother-in-law interjected, still fixated on her luxury goods. Her obsession left me speechless. Enough was enough. Suddenly, my father-in-law shouted, "All you think about is yourself. Have you ever considered how much pain Kate has been through? Are the luxury items you crave so desperately worth someone else's suffering? Do you even understand the emotional burden you've placed on her?" His words struck a chord and silenced them. While his outburst lightened my mood slightly, I wasn't finished yet. "Yuan, when did you find out?" I asked. "On the first night of our honeymoon," he replied, looking down. "I overheard you talking to your mother in the middle of the night. That's when I found out, so I returned to New York the next morning." My husband seemed to realize something at that moment. "You didn't tell the company about this, did you?" "Who knows?" I replied, "but I think we'll find out soon enough." As if on cue, Yuan's cell phone rang. "You've got to be kidding me," I said. The call was from his company. Hesitating, Yuan answered, "Oh, yes. What? Fired?" Wait a minute, but before he could explain, the call ended. "I have already submitted evidence regarding this matter to your company," I said. With the loss of both his job and his marriage, Yuan crumbled to the floor, unable to come to terms with reality. "From now on, any communication will go through my lawyer. Don't ever show up in front of me again." Thus, our brief marriage ended abruptly. However, the story didn't end there. My lawyer advised me to report their actions to the police as their plan constituted illegal activity. I followed the advice, and while they weren't arrested, they did face fines. My husband struggled to find new employment, and my mother-in-law faced criticism from the community. To cover the damages and other costs, she had to sell most of her luxury possessions. The only item she kept was a bag given to her by my father-in-law on her birthday. Now, my father-in-law controls the family finances and my mother-in-law's spending is severely restricted. They've certainly learned a valuable lesson. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my single life in a city apartment. Though my marriage ended soon after it began, I don't feel lonely or sad. On the contrary, I feel refreshed and liberated from that household. If I ever decide to marry again, I'm done with living with in-laws. Living alone has its challenges, but the freedom to live without catering to others is truly liberating. Now that I'm free from my mother-in-law's financial demands, both mentally and financially, I've started saving again. My hope is to share happy times with someone special in the future. That's my wish.
After the somber funeral for my father, a prominent shareholder, my brother-in-law caught us off guard by raising the delicate topic of inheritance. The focus shifted to stocks and a substantial $5 million bequest, confidently asserting that my wife, the eldest daughter, and my sister was set to inherit this windfall. The revelation initially filled her with joy at the prospect of a significant inheritance. However, their excitement was short-lived when the family lawyer delivered the disheartening news that my brother-in-law had no legitimate claim to the inheritance. I, Greg Johnson, a 42-year-old office worker, reflected on my father's vibrant life, despite his age of 78. He remained full of vitality, actively engaged in his work. My older sister, a perpetual source of trouble, led a carefree life, causing continuous worry for our parents. In her middle age, she introduced Aaron Corner, a man she intended to marry. Despite his youth and handsomeness, I couldn't warm up to him due to his demeanor. My sister demanded that our father finance her wedding, swiftly depleting the funds and unapologetically seeking more. A year after her marriage, tragedy struck. Our father collapsed while playing golf and passed away a few days later. Overwhelmed by grief, I found myself struggling with the funeral preparations, with no assistance from my sister. After the funeral, a lawyer visited our home to discuss the inheritance outlined in my father's will. While my mother and I were already aware of its contents, my sister and brother-in-law were oblivious until then. They shockingly claimed that the stocks and the $5 million inheritance should go to my wife. Stunned and speechless, my mother and I were taken aback. The lawyer corrected them, revealing that my brother-in-law had no right to inherit. Surprised and disappointed, my sister and her husband expressed disbelief and shock. The lawyer dropped another bombshell. My sister and I did not share the same father. This revelation left my sister furious, demanding an explanation from our mother, who wore an indescribable expression. The long-held family secret had finally come to light, leaving my sister shaken and seeking answers. "I'm sorry," our mother managed to say amidst the shaking emotions. "You are the child of my previous husband. Since childhood, my sister had teased me, claiming that Dad loved her more. Now faced with the truth, she seemed unable to accept it. However, she quickly shifted her stance, suggesting that if she was adopted, she would still have inheritance rights. Aaron chimed in, agreeing with her, yet our mother firmly denied any adoption, causing disbelief. "I'm the eldest daughter, and even Dad said so," my sister angrily declared, glaring at me in response. I felt my anger intensifying as I countered my sister's insatiable desire for more, despite the considerable amount of money our dad had already given her. My brother-in-law chimed in, supporting her claim and stating that it's natural to spend money on one's daughter. However, the lawyer intervened, drawing attention to the questionable spending, including debt repayment, and suggested reviewing the will. My sister panicked, claiming ignorance about any will. It turned out that our father had wanted to discuss and decide the contents with the family, but she had skipped it for frivolous reasons. When the lawyer proposed reviewing the will, my sister and her husband reluctantly agreed. The will clearly stated the transfer of property to my mother and me, explaining why my sister was not adopted. Her mistreatment of me and reckless spending had disappointed our father, realizing she had no right to the inheritance. My sister was visibly shocked, and her brother-in-law, who had initially supported her, suddenly changed his tune, accusing her of lying and abruptly leaving the room. In her anger, my sister blamed our mother for not asking to have her adopted, claiming it was unfair that only Mom received the inheritance. Frustrated, she cried and screamed, expressing her disappointment. Despite my sister's outrageous behavior, the lawyer remained calm, explaining that as the biological son, I had the right to receive it all. Before things escalated further, he warned that the police might need to be involved if the situation continued. My sister appeared startled by the mention of the police, given her history of repeated theft. As my mother spoke tearfully to her, she clicked her tongue and left the room. Half a year passed, and the inheritance proceedings were completed without issue. Despite some grumbling from my sister and brother-in-law, they couldn't stand against the lawyer's efficiency. My mother gave my sister a small amount of money, but I had no intention of interfering. The frustrating part for our family was that the two had disappeared. Their blatant greed was so evident that even our relatives were lost for words. One day, my wife suggested that my mother, daughter, and I go out to eat. Since my father's passing, our mother had been down, but she showed smiles when with her granddaughter. I suggested to my mother, "Why don't you live with us?" But you know, Rook still comes home occasionally. Sis only comes around to beg for money, doesn't she? How long does she plan to keep this up? The reason my mom defends my sister is that she is her blood-related child, and there might be concern that if we visit our family home, my sister might cause trouble again. Understanding that, I told her to take her time thinking about it and then drove my mom to our family home. Upon arrival, we encountered something unexpected. The lights were on in our supposedly empty home. It wasn't the time for the helper to come, so we were puzzled. I parked the car, suggesting, "Let's go up and have some coffee with Mother." We got out of the car and headed to the entrance, but the moment we approached the door, a car came rushing in. "Mom, watch out." Hearing my daughter ahead of me, I shielded my wife with my body. The car just grazed me, and I managed to dodge it, but I collided with a nearby flower bed, injuring myself badly. The car stopped after hitting the garage door. "Are you okay, Dad?" My wife and daughter rushed over, supporting me. Mother was trembling in shock at the sudden event. Understandably, from that moment on, a day of turmoil began. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance and had to be hospitalized briefly. Later, I heard that Aaron Warner, my brother-in-law, was driving the car. According to the police, he explained that he mistook the accelerator for the brake. However, I had my doubts about that story. Amidst all of this, my sister and mother visited me in the hospital. Mother left briefly to arrange flowers, and during that time, my sister coldly looked at me and said, "You're only tough and bodied, huh?" With a slightly disappointed tone, I couldn't help but give her a smile. "If I had died in the accident, Mom would inherit everything, right? Messed up your plan," I said a bit sarcastically, and my sister looked uneasy. "You planned this, didn't you?" When I asked, my sister looked away, and I added, "But I won't be accepting Mom's share, so it won't work out for you." My sister looked surprised at this. She probably thought I would naturally accept it. I have a wife and kids, so I passed the inheritance to them. It's not strange for the head of the family to think that way. Even so, I've made a will early, like Dad did. My sister was taken aback at this. "What? So that means—" "Yeah, unfortunately, my share of the inheritance won't go to Mom." My sister stared at me, then began to shake with anger. "There's $5 million, right? You could at least share a bit." When I immediately refused, my sister furiously grabbed my collar. "I'm your sister. We should split it." Whether it was the amount of the inheritance that drove her mad, she continued to scream in a very aggressive voice. I felt pity for my sister. It's that greedy attitude that disappointed Dad. Don't you get it? My sister's face turned even redder, and she grabbed my neck. "Bro, stop it." Mother, who had just returned, scolded her loudly. Then the nurses, called by the nurses' call button, arrived and escorted my sister out of the room. Mother seemed to want to protect my sister, but my sister had lashed out at her too. As she left, she asked, "Why did she turn out like this?" Hearing Mother say this sadly, I felt a pain in my heart. Later, Mother's health deteriorated, and she fell off, gradually weakening. My wife and I started visiting the family home more frequently to support her, but this seemed to upset my sister. Probably she encountered my wife when coming to ask for money or heard about it from Mother. One day, my sister called my cell phone. "From now on, we will take care of Mom. You guys don't need to come. Watch this." All of a sudden, however, my sister wasn't listening and said, "We've already decided," before hanging up. My wife told me she had been turned away by my sister. Too concerned about how my sister, who had no experience in household chores or living, would manage, I quickly contacted Mother. To my surprise, I found out that my brother-in-law had experience in caregiving. Mother was still independent, not yet in a worrying state. This reassured me. However, within just a month, Mother was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. It was said to be due to a medication dosage error. When we rushed to the hospital, Mother was shockingly weak. The doctors also seemed puzzled by her condition. I couldn't recall such a mistake ever happening before. Leaving my wife to care for Mother, I went to our family home, which was in a terrible state. Despite my mother's love for cooking, the usually well-stocked fridge was shockingly empty. Even the helper had been swiftly dismissed. Feeling ashamed of trusting my sister even a little, anger surged within me. Checking the safe where valuables were kept, I discovered a large amount of money missing from Mother's passbook. The passbook with the inheritance was secure in a bank locker, but there was hardly any money left for living expenses. Returning to my mother, I explained the situation and revealed my sister's betrayal. Brooke did such a thing. Mother seemed unaware of the passbook issue and showed a shocked expression. When asked about the medication error, she explained that my brother-in-law had prepared it and looked troubled. "Mom, I don't think you should let them into that house. They claimed they would take care of you, but the state of that house was the worst. And you've gotten so frail. Haven't they been feeding you properly?" Speaking with concern, I hung her head. "Mom, let's live together. I'll build a new house, and we can live there together." Moved by my suggestion, Mother shed tears. However, her condition continued to worsen. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they, along with my sister, seemed to weigh heavily on her. Ultimately, Mother passed away without recovering. When I went to the family home for the funeral, all the valuable items had disappeared. It seemed that my sister and brother-in-law, in need of money, had taken them. Standing in the desolate place, I was overcome with anger. I had to find a way to make my sister take responsibility for Mother's sake and as atonement for what she had done. I resolved to do something. The day after Mother's funeral, my sister and I met at the lawyer's office to discuss the inheritance. Condolences, but as her daughter, I'm entitled to Mother's inheritance. My sister said with a sense of superiority that made me laugh involuntarily. She seemed to be under some misconception. "Let's open the will then." As the lawyer revealed the contents of the will, my sister turned pale. "You're joking. Why, bro? You are not entitled to any of the inheritance. This is in accordance with Dad's wishes." My brother-in-law started to get angry, but the lawyer had nothing else to say except repeat the same thing. "This must be a mistake. Bro is her child, isn't she?" My brother-in-law suddenly became furious, throwing things off the table. "Are you trying to trick us? We won't let you get away with this. Give us the inheritance now." "Aaron, you planned to kill Mother, didn't you?" When I asked, my brother-in-law glared at me unpleasantly. "Oh, I wouldn't do such a thing." "Then why did the medication error occur?" My brother-in-law appeared annoyed. "I don't know anything about that. It's impossible that I can't inherit. You must have done something." My sister was getting more agitated. "Now I'm even behind on my condo payments." I was shocked. She hadn't rushed to Mother's side after hearing of her death because she was busy with such matters, hoping for the inheritance. Really, there's nothing left. My sister pressed the lawyer. That seems to be the case. Let me explain in detail. The lawyer explained the details of the inheritance. Ultimately, after deducting what my sister had withdrawn and sold, there was hardly anything left for her to inherit. My sister held her head in dismay. I had discussed this in advance with the lawyer. I found satisfaction with the outcome. Stop joking. There can't be so little. My mother and I hadn't told my sister, but most of Mother's property had already been distributed to my children, her grandchildren. Therefore, there was already little left to inherit. However, my sister kept murmuring her dissatisfaction. I felt nothing but resentment towards my sister, who had lived off the money given by father and now mother, thinking she could rest easy knowing I would take care of her. But you just took her money. You are a true disgrace to our parents. I raised my voice in frustration. Caring for someone costs money, you know. Don't you understand? Then show me the receipts for what you spent on mom's care. I'll cover any necessary expenses. As I extended my hand, my sister turned pale and was at a loss for words. I threw those away. That's not good. Without receipts, it can't be proven as evidence. Hearing the lawyer's words, my sister struggled to find a response. During this, my brother-in-law tried to calm me down. Greg, your sister is in a tough spot. Maybe you could help her out a bit as family. I cannot. My immediate response left my brother-in-law speechless. I've been hurt by my sister for a long time. Frankly, I feel like it's karma, but you're the only siblings, maybe just a little. He tried to say more, but I refused. I was filled with anger, and so was my brother-in-law, apparently. Dan, if that accident had worked out, Rook would have had the entire inheritance. What accident? Before I could ask, my brother-in-law started talking on his own. Because of this brother, things didn't go as planned. I was supposed to get a new car, but now there's barely enough money left even for repairs. My sister tried to stop him, but it was too late. That's a pretty serious statement. You could be accused of fraud. The lawyer held a recorder, smirking at my sister and brother-in-law. What the heck? Isn't that against the rules to do that? You agreed to our conversation being recorded at the beginning, didn't you? Called out by his own words, my brother-in-law's face turned pale. To him, I had one thing to say. Aaron, I will be pressing charges about that accident. Don't joke. Where's the evidence? The evidence has just been provided by you. My sister, crying, began to hit my brother-in-law. You idiot! It's all your fault. Why did you say that? Later, my brother-in-law faced legal consequences for his actions. Additionally, unresolved suspicions about his past emerged, requiring police involvement. For some time, my sister, as an accomplice, was said to face lesser charges. However, struggling with her condo payments, she was turned away by relatives when she asked for money. In contrast, I chose to work earnestly and not rely on inheritance. Now, receiving stock dividends has become a small pleasure in my life. In the aftermath of the legal proceedings, the rift between my sister and me widened. The family bonds that were already strained became nearly non-existent. Despite her attempts to seek support from relatives, my sister faced a cold shoulder and her financial struggles continued. Meanwhile, I focused on building a stable and fulfilling life for my own family, working diligently. I found solace in providing for my wife and children without relying on the tumultuous inheritance battles that had plagued us. The stock dividends became not just a financial benefit, but a symbol of my commitment to a more secure and principled life. Over time, my sister's situation didn't improve. The consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her, both financially and emotionally. It became a stark reminder of the importance of responsible choices and the lasting impact they can have on one's life. As the years passed, I held no ill will towards my sister, recognizing that everyone faces their own battles and makes their own choices. Still, the events that unfolded served as a powerful lesson about the significance of integrity, responsibility, and the enduring consequences of one's actions. In the midst of the turmoil, I found strength in forging ahead with resilience, determined to create a future that wasn't tainted by past misfortunes. The dividends, once a mere financial gain, evolved into a testament to the enduring power of personal growth and the ability to rise above adversity. Life moved forward, and I embraced the opportunities to thrive, leaving behind the shadows of familial discord. The lessons learned from this chapter of my life became an integral part of shaping my values and decisions, ensuring a legacy built on principles rather than the pursuit of material gain. In the end, it was not the inheritance that defined my journey, but the choices made along the way. Choices that led to a life grounded in authenticity, resilience, and a commitment to building a better future for those I cared about the most. My name is Rachel, and currently, I reside in an annex of my in-laws' house with my husband, Stefan. While Stefan lives in the main house with his parents, I am the sole occupant of the annex. Originally, this annex was a small structure built by Stefan's grandfather as a personal project to create a private space. Over time, it has been converted into a living space approximately the size of a room, thanks to my efforts. Initially, Stefan and I lived in a regular apartment for about 3 years after our marriage. However, his parents, who greatly adore him, suddenly expressed their desire to live with Stefan. In response, Stefan, as the dutiful son, declared that he also wanted to be with his parents. Witnessing their emotional reaction, including tears and embraces, I found myself taken aback by the heartfelt scene. Stefan and I first crossed paths at work, where he was my direct subordinate when he joined the company midway through his career. We became a couple after 3 years of dating. Throughout that dating period, he resided at his parents' house. It appears that this prolonged stay fostered a sense of homesickness in both Stefan and his parents. Stefan, who had been pampered at home, seemed to have never been involved in any household chores. After our marriage, when I suggested sharing housework, he appeared reluctant, stating that he had never done any housework before. The problematic aspect was that, despite my intention to divide the chores between us, Stefan seemed to have never considered participating in household tasks himself. I sensed a pattern in all of this. Whenever I attempted to involve him in household chores, Stefan would feign interest for a brief moment, grow disinterested, and eventually say, "This isn't for me. You're better at this, Rachel. You should keep doing it." Both of us were employed, and given my higher position at work, I felt a greater need to share the household responsibilities. However, encouraging him to help often proved to be more time-consuming than handling everything myself. It reached a point where I found it less troublesome to manage everything alone. The dynamics shifted when I transitioned to remote work. Stefan, seemingly surprised to find me at home every day, initially understood the change. He stopped complaining about my altered lifestyle, or so I thought. It became apparent later that he hadn't fully grasped the implications of my decision. Several years into my remote work, Stefan's parents suddenly visited our apartment, expressing a desire to live with him. Witnessing their emotional reunion, I felt a sense of isolation and bewilderment. Eventually, with Stefan's wish to be with his parents, we made the decision to move into their house. Stefan consistently chose locations close to his parents, whether it was for renting an apartment or selecting a job. For me, remote work made the location irrelevant, but his choices required us to uproot ourselves and quit our jobs. Upon settling into his parents' house, Stefan's mother expressed gratitude, saying, "Thank you for taking care of Stefan all this time. From now on, I will take good care of Stefan. Rachel, please take care of everything else." Initially, I interpreted this as a relief from doing housework for Stefan, but soon I realized her intentions were different. My mother-in-law's tasks involved preparing special meals exclusively for Stefan, meticulously laundering only his clothes, ensuring his shoes and belongings stayed immaculate, and purchasing various items specifically for him. As for all other household chores, those for Stefan's parents and myself, including cooking and laundry, were now solely delegated to me despite my ongoing commitment to work. Now, I found myself burdened with the responsibility of not only managing household chores for Stefan's parents and myself, but also maintaining the cleanliness of the larger family house. The prospect left me disheartened. Despite my efforts, this cohabitation seemed to bring happiness only to Stefan and his parents, with no apparent benefits for me. In fact, it felt like my burdens had increased. During one cleaning session, my father-in-law approached me with a request. He looked apologetic as he explained, "Rachel, I have a favor to ask. Could you contribute some money?" Confused, I inquired further. He elaborated, expressing his difficulty in asking Stefan to contribute to household expenses for both of us. Apparently, Stefan had worked hard, and it felt challenging to request financial contributions from him. Stefan and I had previously agreed to share expenses like apartment rent and other living costs. However, Stefan often tried to get me to pay for various items during our shopping trips, including unnecessary ingredients, alcohol, clothes, and accessories. When I resisted, he would act like a child denied a toy, calling me stingy. Despite these financial disagreements, I found comfort in the fact that, apart from these issues, Stefan didn't interfere much with my everyday life. This sense of comfort changed when we started living together, as Stefan's mother began to disrupt my routine. Unlike Stefan, she relentlessly interrupted my work at home, insisting I prioritize household chores. She would barge into my room, pulling on my clothes, making it impossible for me to focus on my work. Frustrated, I discussed the matter with Stefan, anticipating him to take his mother's side. Surprisingly, Stefan listened and promised to talk to his mother. I hoped for a compromise that would consider both our needs. Little did I know that Stefan's idea of a compromise would involve banishing me to the annex, a new, private room. I approached Stefan with a question about the hut, jokingly asking if I could even demolish it and build a new house. To my surprise, he casually replied, "You can even demolish it and build a new house if you want." Taking his words seriously, I promptly began remodeling the hut according to my taste. Engaged in cleaning, renovating, and changing wallpapers, I noticed that Stefan never once showed his face. Despite being married, it became apparent that Stefan had no intention of living in the remodeled hut with me. As I transformed the space, it dawned on me that within the family living trio, I was the only outsider. There were instances when I found myself alone at home, either when they went out to a barbecue restaurant or when I had to work overtime and missed out on shared meals. While these spirited plans were usually concocted by Stefan's mother, it seemed clear that she might have been the driving force behind my exclusion, perhaps hoping I would quickly leave her son. Despite this, Stefan had given me the freedom to do anything with the hut, and I took full advantage of it, engaging in DIY projects, installing new shelves, and personalizing the space. I made it my own. Interestingly, neither Stefan nor his parents ever visited the hut after I moved out. Although they must have been aware of my renovations, it seemed like I was no longer considered a part of their family, and they had no interest in my activities. Living away from the main house, especially without Stefan's mother around, I began to relish the independence, almost like living alone. I found solace in the fact that staying in the hut prevented her from interfering with my work. Installing new locks and enhancing security during the renovation, I ensured that no one, not even Stefan or his parents, could enter without my knowledge. It led me to reconsider if this new separation wasn't such a bad arrangement after all. However, it seemed my mother-in-law had anticipated my feelings. Unable to tolerate the treatment any longer, I found myself at a crossroads, contemplating my next move. As I settled into the renovated cabin, my mother-in-law's desperation to drive me out became palpable. Her petty harassment started with leaving trash in front of my cabin on garbage day instead of at the collection site. Sometimes, she would host barbecues in the garden without extending an invitation, intentionally wafting the smell of grilled meat towards my cabin. Despite her mild attempts, I couldn't help but smile at her futile efforts to push me away. Then, one day, she summoned me to the main house under the pretense of leftover meat and potatoes. Sensing there was more to it, I went along. Upon arrival, only she was present, and she placed a single piece of paper on the living room table, a divorce paper. It was clear that the real reason she called me was to present this document. If his mother instructed Stefan to submit it, he would do so without hesitation. All that remained was for me to agree, and Stefan and I could be divorced simply by submitting the paper to the city court. With a proud expression, his mother asserted, "Isn't it about time you gave up? There's no reason for you and Stefan to stay married anymore. Get out, you freeloading, unemployed woman." I was taken aback by her audacity, but her certainty in her plan only fueled my determination. Thrilled by the prospect of freedom, I eagerly asked to take the divorce paper, stating, "I'm going to the city court right now. Thank you so much." My mother-in-law, who had likely expected me to resist divorce, was left dumbfounded by my unexpected response. Having submitted the divorce paper at the city court, I wasted no time in packing my belongings. Feeling it was necessary to inform Stefan's mother about the divorce, I headed to the main house and informed her that the process had been successful. Regarding the cabin I renovated, I assured her that I would leave it as is, and she was free to demolish it or use it as she pleased. My positive attitude about leaving surprised even my mother-in-law, who, though seeming happy about my departure, wished me luck as I packed. On the day of my departure, Stefan and his father, seemingly realizing that I was truly leaving, expressed concern, asking, "Are you really going? What will we do without Rachel?" I smiled and thanked them for letting me use the cabin. I explained that since there was no point in being married anymore, and we were now divorced, it was time for me to move on. As I organized my belongings, I completed my move to a luxury apartment, a change I had been arranging for. Not long after settling into my new apartment, my mother-in-law called me awkwardly, saying, "Rachel, I need to ask you something." Cheerfully, I responded, "What's up? How's the cabin I'm using right now?" She then inquired about money, mentioning that Stefan had told her I was giving his father $33,000 a month. Confirming that it was true, I explained that despite her earlier accusation of being an unemployed freeloader, I was indeed working. She seemed surprised, thinking I had quit my job. I clarified that I hadn't quit but left the company to become the president of a new company, setting up a remote work system. Her reaction was one of disbelief, and I sighed, realizing that even Stefan was unaware of my promotion. Considering his attitude since we started living together, it seemed he never truly thought of himself as a husband. When asked about my earnings, including my side job, I nonchalantly mentioned it was roughly around $2 million. I may have exaggerated a bit with the $2 million figure. It's just a hassle to explain the exact figures. With that much money, could you lend us some? Actually, Father was laid off, and he kept it hidden. We've been managing somehow with the $3,000 you've been giving us. Neither Stefan nor I knew about it. It all made sense to me now. My father-in-law's words about it being pitiful to ask his son for money were just a pretense to get me to pay. He probably assumed I had money due to my superior position at our former company, and as a result, sweetly scammed me out of $3,000 a month under the guise of living expenses. In the end, I didn't mind too much since it allowed me to live peacefully in that quiet cabin. "Well, I'm divorced from Stefan now, so I don't have any connection with your family, right?" When I asserted this, my mother-in-law pleaded, "That's not true. To me and to Stefan, you're still family. Come back to us." I immediately declined, recognizing the potential for being used again. Stepping back into a relationship with Stefan would bring me no benefits. We were now complete strangers, and I found it uncomfortable for them to keep calling me family. Besides, they were the ones who drove me out in the first place. I'm really enjoying my life alone now. It's pretty much the same as when I was married, mostly living alone. The difference is, back then, I didn't spend money on myself, and $3,000 was taken from me every month. I prefer my current life much better. Goodbye then. I ended the call without hesitation, not understanding why they thought I would return. For my mother-in-law, it must have been a last-ditch effort. In fact, Stefan's salary wasn't that great, and he had a habit of saying, "I can't do it," and passing work to others. This trait, displayed in both our personal life and at the office, left him deemed unreliable, and he remained a regular employee without any salary increase. On top of that, with his father laid off and his mother being a housewife, they couldn't maintain their large house and ended up selling it. Now the three of them are living in the cabin I renovated. While it's just right for one person, it must be quite uncomfortable for three people in that cramped space. Since then, I haven't thought about them and continue to live peacefully.
7 people should be fine. The child can sit separately. My mother-in-law Jane's words ring out clearly and without hesitation. Her constant torment had reached its peak, but today was the day I planned to confront it all. At this family gathering, I intended to reveal a hidden truth that had been simmering beneath the surface. I'm Nancy, a 28-year-old chef. After graduating from culinary school, I began working at a renowned Western-style restaurant where I met my husband, Mike. He was a regular customer at the restaurant, hailing from a family with a long-standing legacy in the electronics industry. Following his father's passing last year, Mike took over the family business. My own family is fairly ordinary, except for one notable detail. My parents and even my older brother are all chefs. Growing up, every meal at home was a special event, fueling my passion for cooking. I'm proud to say I graduated at the top of my class thanks to my family's support and background. Generally, I'm a calm person, but I take great pride in my culinary skills. However, everything changed after marriage. When Mike and I decided to marry, I knew I would be moving into this family home. While I was prepared for the transition, I didn't anticipate it happening so quickly. In retrospect, I wish we had discussed it more thoroughly. Initially, Jane welcomed me with unexpected warmth. She was incredibly attentive, bringing treats and offering to handle household chores. Naturally, her home-cooked meals became a staple at our dining table. But there was a catch. Her cooking was vastly different from what I was used to. Jane, coming from the northern part of the country, preferred much stronger flavors. Her seasoning was so intense that it was hard to distinguish the ingredients in her dishes. A bite often felt like wading through a sea of salt. Jane would cheerfully say, "You need it this strong to make the rice more appetizing," and would encourage me to have seconds. Internally, I found it overwhelming, though Mike, sitting next to me, seemed to think the food was just a bit bland. I was stunned when Jane mentioned that she had toned down the flavors for my benefit. Each day, my sense of taste seemed to dull, which affected my confidence in seasoning dishes at work. Thankfully, the head chef, who always inspects my dishes, hadn't raised any concerns, but I felt compelled to act. I began waking up earlier to prepare breakfast to my taste, which helped restore some of my confidence in seasoning. However, Jane noticed my efforts and started growing distant. Her behavior changed subtly at first, ignoring my greetings more frequently and making sharp comments about my cooking. "Isn't the dinner tonight a bit bland?" she asked. I reassured her. I believe I seasoned it properly. Despite my attempts to adapt, it seemed Jane's disapproval was only growing. I took a bite and knew instantly that it wasn't bland. The seasoning felt lacking, almost tasteless. "Doesn't it bother you?" Jane asked, her voice laced with disapproval. "I think for health reasons, it's better not to make it too rich. Enjoying delicious food is important, but preparing meals at home isn't your job. You should adjust to our preferences." No matter what I said, Jane always had a counter-argument. Then, with a dismissive gesture, she drenched the dish I had put so much effort into with soy sauce. I was confused and hurt. I was trying to be considerate of the family's health with lighter seasoning, yet this was the result. I felt lost, and my mind drifted back to an earlier event, my niece Jessica's 5th birthday party, held at my sister-in-law Kathy's home. Kathy has 2 older sisters who are incredibly warm and supportive. From the start, they assured me they'd be there for me if I ever needed anything. Their husbands were equally kind and approachable. At the party, I helped with the cooking as Jane had asked. The table was filled with a variety of dishes clearly distinguished by their origins. My dishes were Western style, while Jane's were traditional Japanese, leading to a stark contrast in ambience and seasoning. The party began on a high note. Jessica, who adores the Omiras from NY's restaurant, was thrilled to have it at home. Kathy, with a cheerful smile, said, "I often make that Omiras myself." Jessica, brimming with enthusiasm, declared, "I love Omiras. NY's is the best." Her excitement brightened the mood instantly. However, Jane seemed slightly out of place. She pushed her own dish, saying, "Come on, try this. It's Grandma's special stew." Jessica hesitated, noting, "It's a bit too salty for me." After tasting the stew, Kathy's husband grimaced and asked, "Could you tone down the salt next time? Can I have some more water, please?" The atmosphere grew awkward as Kathy's comment hung in the air. "Mom, don't you think your dish is a bit too rich today? Maybe you could cook with Nancy and pick up some seasoning tips from her." Kathy said with a laugh. Though she might have been joking, Jane's face flushed with anger. Without a word, she snapped and retreated from the room. I felt overwhelmed and speechless. Despite my best efforts to help with the cooking, it seemed like I had inadvertently made things worse. The tension lingered, and eventually, everyone decided to leave early. It was disheartening to have my heartfelt efforts criticized. That night, I apologized to Jane, but her response was sharp. "You're just living here, and yet you're so presumptuous." I was hurt, but I tried to understand her feelings and be patient. However, the next day, it became clear that her attitude towards me had shifted. She began adding excessive seasoning to the breakfast I prepared, often grimacing as she did. Sometimes, she would throw the food away without even tasting it. When I sought support from Mike, he dismissed my concerns with comments like, "Aren't you being a bit stubborn?" or "You're probably just overreacting." His responses made me feel distant, as if the issue was not his concern. Despite being newlyweds, he started coming home late and avoided family events. The growing distance between us made me question if I could continue living like this. I'd even considered divorce, but the thought of explaining the situation to our parents and relatives was daunting. Things took a turn for the worse when Jane fell down the stairs and injured her foot. Kathy promptly offered to help with daily chores, but Jane insisted that I take over. She began assigning me a multitude of errands and even called me during work hours. The constant early departures from work led to concerned glances and complaints from my colleagues, ultimately forcing me to resign. When Jane learned of my resignation, she remarked with a sense of superiority, "It's a pity, considering how much you love that job." The days that followed were incredibly tough. I was on call for Jane day and night, leaving me with little time for myself. Even when I asked Mike for help, he consistently made implausible excuses, claiming he was too busy or staying overnight at the company. I felt I could no longer stay in this house, but I didn't want to leave without making a statement. One clear morning, as the three of us sat at the table, I mustered the courage to say, "I'm considering a divorce." Mike and Jane were stunned. "Why all of a sudden?" Mike asked, wide-eyed. "We've just gotten married. Did I do something wrong? Aren't you misunderstanding something?" Jane, with a disgruntled expression, added, "Asking for a divorce without any reason is childish." Their reactions made me feel belittled, but my resolve was unshakable. "I'm not misunderstanding anything," I replied firmly. "Mike is constantly away, and Jane seems to take pleasure in tormenting me. Why would I want to stay in such an environment? I'm going to get a divorce. My decision is final." My declaration took them by surprise. "I'm sorry, I'll come home earlier from now on," Mike said, his face showing some displeasure. "If you want, you can go back to your parents' home for a while. But considering my mother's leg, could you stay here a bit longer?" Mike's suggestion carried an undertone of frustration. I acknowledged his offer but replied simply, "Understood." At that moment, I noticed the smirks on their faces, like mother, like son. For a short period, Jane's antagonistic behavior diminished and Mike genuinely tried to come home earlier. However, this brief period of peace didn't last long. Mike's overtime work increased and Jane's ill temper resurfaced. Despite her supposedly injured foot, she frequently ventured out. As I pondered their behavior, I was on the verge of uncovering an unbelievable truth. A few days later, my cell phone rang continuously with calls from Jane and Mike. Mike's voice was filled with anger. "Where are you? How could you just leave my mother alone like that? You were the one who said I could go back to my parents' home," I coldly retorted. "But my mother's foot still isn't healed." Mike continued with seemingly trivial excuses, and in the background, I could hear Jane's irritated voice. "From now on, let's discuss matters through a lawyer," I said with a heavy sigh before hanging up. Back at my parents' house, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension as I began to prepare for the next steps. I spent my days feeling rejuvenated at my parents' home. The warmth and familiarity there helped heal my emotional wounds. The time I spent with them felt truly fulfilling, especially when my mother prepared my favorite dishes. Her love was palpable, and as I helped with the cooking, I felt the deep bond of family once more. When my mother praised the dish I made, saying it was delicious, tears welled up in my eyes. In the midst of this comforting routine, my phone rang unexpectedly. To my surprise, it was Jane. She apologized for everything she had done in the past and invited me to her birthday party, which was to be held at a renowned upscale restaurant in town. Despite my mixed feelings, I saw it as a chance to bridge gaps and decided to attend. Jane seemed satisfied as she informed me of the party details, including the time. On the day of the event, Mike and Jane were already waiting outside the restaurant. When they spotted me, both greeted me with smug smiles. The attendees were the same as the previous party. My two sisters-in-law, Kathy and Meg, their husbands, my niece Jessica, Mike, and Jane, 8 people in total. Before everyone arrived, Mike and Jane instructed me not to mention our divorce to the family until after dinner. When Kathy, Meg, and their families showed up, Kathy greeted me warmly. "Nancy, it's been a while. You seem to have lost a bit of weight. Are you doing okay?" Once everyone was gathered, we approached the restaurant. A staff member greeted us and said, "Your reservation is for 7 people under the name of Jane, correct?" I was sure we had 8, but Jane interjected, "Yes, 7 is correct. Nancy can sit at a different table." As I looked around, I saw the surprised expressions on the faces of my sisters-in-law and their husbands, while Mike and Jane wore satisfied smirks. It became clear to me that this was their plan. How childish could they be? "Nancy, you've prepared a special surprise, haven't you?" Jane taunted with a smirk. Who makes themselves the center of attention with a surprise at their own birthday party? Only someone like Jane, I thought. Well, if that's how she wants it. I quickly came up with a delightful surprise. "Nancy, do you really have something planned? Even if you don't feel too much pressure," Kathy said with concern. I whispered back, "Yes, I do have something in mind, but Jane's behavior is making it difficult." Excusing myself, I asked the staff if any seats were available. They kindly offered me a spot that was out of Jane and Mike's line of sight. As the group enjoyed their meal, a special children's menu was served for Jessica, who excitedly declared, "This tastes just like the owner from Ometers." Kathy praised the dishes and Jane boasted, "Ever since this restaurant got a new chef, the flavors have improved significantly. The meat dish coming out next is supposed to be outstanding." Mike nodded in agreement, and soon the much-anticipated meat dish began to be served to Kathy, Meg, and their families. For some reason, Jane and Mike's table was overlooked. Jane, clearly agitated, called out to a waiter with a raised voice, "Please wait a moment, we will serve it shortly." The waiter replied. I watched with some amusement before heading to the kitchen to prepare. A few minutes later, I emerged wearing a chef's apron and announced, "Sorry for the wait." Jane and Mike stared at me in disbelief. "Could it be that you made the dish?" Kathy asked, her voice filled with surprise and delight. Jane and Mike were left speechless as I cheerfully placed the dishes in front of them. I even gave them a playful wink and said, "Enjoy." Feeling mischievous, I presented Jane with a special dish drenched in soy sauce and gleaming darkly on the plate. For the final touch, I poured even more soy sauce over it, leaving Jane stunned into silence. I then set a unique dish in front of Mike, saying, "I hope this energizes you like a battery." I placed several actual batteries on Mike's plate with a smirk. My niece burst into laughter at the sight, while Kathy, Meg, and their husbands looked on with a mix of shock and concern. "What kind of service is this? Where's the manager?" Mike demanded. "You won't get away with this." Just then, the restaurant's manager approached, maintaining a calm demeanor. "Is there an issue here?" he asked. "You think you can just do this to us without consequences?" Mike challenged. The manager replied, "Given the disruption to our business, we are considering pressing charges against you." Jane and Mike were left speechless by the turn of events. It turned out Jane and Mike had been frequent visitors, often causing trouble. They had a reputation for complaining about the food and disturbing other patrons. Although their behavior had been overlooked before because they were related to me, the manager made it clear that this would no longer be tolerated. "Since they're related to my family, we've been lenient, but we won't hesitate to take action now," the manager said, addressing me. Is that all right with you, Nancy? Of course, I replied. Jane and Mike stared in astonishment. It turned out my brother Jason had recently become the owner of the restaurant. He had been in France and couldn't attend my wedding, so while Jane and Mike knew about him, they had never met him. Jason, however, recognized them from the photos I had sent of my husband's family. I'm sorry, Jason said, addressing Jane and Mike with a firm but polite tone. I wasn't able to celebrate with you at the wedding, I began. I wanted to approach you several times, but you always seemed to be with someone else. Jane and Mike looked at me with sheer disbelief. Sensing that this conversation might take a while, Kathy and Meg suggested to their husbands that they head home first. After seeing them off, they turned back to us, their smiles masking serious expressions. Can we hear the details? Kathy asked, her gaze intense. I was taken aback by Kathy and Meg's seriousness, a side of them I hadn't seen before. Mike attempted to explain. Well, it was a meeting with colleagues from the industry. This restaurant is quite popular, so we decided to try it out. Just then, a staff member approached Mike, handing him a pair of earrings. You left these behind during your last visit, the staff member said. Kathy raised an eyebrow and teased, Were you dining with men who wear these? I chuckled and replied, It's not like that, Kathy. Mike has been having an affair with a woman who works at a nearby flower shop. Mike's face turned pale. How did you find out? He asked, shocked. I hired a detective some time ago, I explained. My suspicions were confirmed. They frequently met at this restaurant, which was their favorite spot. I even have photographic evidence of their meetings. Mike, no longer trying to hide his affair, said, I truly love her. Marrying you was a mistake. I'm ready for a divorce. His response was a relief to me as I had been considering divorce myself. Fine, but make sure to pay the alimony, I replied. No problem, Mike said confidently. I recently landed a big business deal, so money isn't a concern. That's good to hear, I said. Turning to Jane, who had remained quiet until now, I added, And as for you, Jane, until recently you had been seeing someone for about 5 years, but your husband only passed away a year ago, right? Jane's agitation was clear. Kathy and Meg, visibly injured, glared at their mother. They had been closer to their father and were likely upset by this revelation. What surprised me was that the detective knew so much about Jane because my father-in-law had hired him as well. I couldn't help but chuckle at the coincidence. Did you really deceive our father for so long? And Mike, how could you betray such a lovely woman like Nancy? Kathy and Meg exclaimed, their eyes filled with a mix of sadness, surprise, and anger. The growing awareness of other customers around us made it clear that continuing this conversation was becoming difficult. We proposed reconvening on another date and more private setting as I left the restaurant. I shared smiles with Jason and the other staff members, savoring a moment of joy and accomplishment. My brother later told me that many regular patrons were at the restaurant that day, and after the troublesome guests were evicted, the staff received applause from the other diners. Jason had only booked a table for 7 in advance, making our plan a flawless success. As a result, Mike and Jane would no longer be welcome at my brother's restaurant. A few days later, we held a private family meeting where, in front of Kathy and Meg, Mike and I signed our divorce papers. Mike coldly declared, I don't care what happens from here on out. Jane lamented, I can't believe such a troublesome Nancy was my son's wife, especially when I'm supposedly unable to walk. To cut off her endless complaints, I snapped, Jane, watch your feet. To my surprise, Jane, who had claimed difficulty walking, leaped up, revealing that her leg had fully recovered. Her so-called pain was a mere act of retaliation against me. Her frequent outings despite her alleged pain had raised my suspicions, and it was clear she was deceitful to the end. But now she was someone I had no time for. Thus my short-lived marriage ended without regrets. The alimony was deposited into my account as promised. Whether Mike had to pay his mistress or not was irrelevant to me. In the aftermath, despite the hefty alimony that plunged him into debt, Mike reportedly broke up with his mistress shortly after our divorce. Kathy later told me that the woman was notorious in the local community for causing trouble with married men. Moreover, the significant business deal Mike had boasted about also fell through. His reputation suffered greatly after the commotion at Jason's restaurant, and word of the incident spread to his business associates. Given the importance of trust in their industry, the impending contract was soon rescinded. It was all a consequence of his own actions, and his professional future looked bleak. As for Jane, she was also abandoned by her male companion. After seeking medical attention for health concerns, she discovered that her excessive salt intake was the cause of her problems, and maintaining good health would now be a challenge for her. Her dietary habits over the years have led to this unfortunate outcome. I returned to work at the Western-style restaurant I had previously resigned from. Despite the trouble I had caused, my former colleagues welcomed me back warmly. Kathy, Meg, and my niece Jessica occasionally came to dine, cheering me on. They had completely cut ties with Mike and Jane, unable to forgive their actions, especially given their respect for my late father-in-law and their desire to protect me. Despite the ups and downs, I have reclaimed some of the most enjoyable and valuable moments of my life as a chef. I'm now leading a truly fulfilling life. Hello, I'm Patricia, 48 years old, and I live with my husband Ethan and my mother-in-law in a well-connected suburb close to the train station, which provides excellent access to the city center. During our house hunting phase, Ethan, who had just been promoted to a managerial position, insisted on finding a spacious apartment, even though it came with a high rent. He believed the extra space was worth the cost. Ethan is 6 years older than me and was introduced to me by a mutual friend after his divorce. His mature, comforting presence quickly became something I relied on. After 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. When I revealed my struggles with infertility due to a past illness, his affection remained unwavering. My feelings for him only grew stronger even after learning about his previous marriage and his son Willie from that relationship. I'm truly sorry to ask you to live with my parents and son, Ethan had said. I promise I won't let you suffer. I'll ensure you're happy and give you space so you don't feel suffocated. He suggested moving into a large apartment where I could have my own room. Willie, turning 9 that year, wouldn't require much care, especially with his grandmother around to help. After his divorce, Ethan's parents had supported him with childcare till his father tragically passed away in an accident, leaving his mother to take over as Willie's caretaker. From our very first meeting, Willie barely made eye contact with me. Initially, I attributed his reserved demeanor to his age and possible shyness, so I didn't let it bother me too much. As long as the family accepted me, I felt content to be part of their household. My mother-in-law, a woman of quiet elegance, treated me with kindness during our formal introduction post-engagement, which gave me hope that we could coexist peacefully. She set clear expectations from the start. I'll continue to prepare the meals as usual. Ethan often comes home late, so it's fine if we eat at different times, right, Patricia? I'll leave the cleaning and laundry to you. Let's work well together, she said. After we married, I transitioned from full-time to part-time work at the pharmacy to better manage the household chores. This new schedule meant I wouldn't get home until nearly 9:05 p.m., but at least dinner was always ready, a small comfort during my solo dining routine. My mother-in-law and Willie typically ate before I arrived, which reinforced a sense of isolation even within my married life. At first, I wondered if this was all there was to family life, but I gradually accepted it as our way. Despite our seemingly smooth start, it became evident that my mother-in-law never truly accepted me or considered me part of the family. In my attempts to bond with Willie, I asked about his school activities. Willie, when is the school's activity day before summer? We're all going to see you, aren't we? Before he could answer, my mother-in-law quickly intervened, saying, We'll go, just Ethan and me. Patricia, you don't need to worry about it. Misunderstanding her intentions, I persisted, I can take the day off work. Let's all go together. But she dismissed me sharply. You don't need to do that. You're Ethan's wife and family has always just been Ethan and me. Her words stunned me. That night, I expressed my shock to Ethan, who explained, Mom has been clinging to Willie. She probably thinks you're trying to take him away. I'll talk to her about it over time. I managed to attend the activity day, hoping to integrate into the family as a mother figure. However, Willie and I rarely interacted outside of these school events. Sometimes I sensed he wanted to open up, but my mother-in-law consistently interjected, blocking any progress. I later discovered she had been tarnishing my image in Willie's eyes, suggesting that I would be happier if he weren't in the picture. This revelation deeply hurt me, highlighting the complexities and challenges of blending into a family with pre-existing bonds and hidden resentments. The accusations were harsh. She's a terrible person. Dad must be deceived by her too. Hearing such negative comments from my mother-in-law must have influenced Willie during his impressionable teenage years, explaining why he grew distant from me. The situation was disheartening. I had never imagined she could be so manipulative. By the time Willie graduated from high school, he was eager to leave home. He moved in with his girlfriend immediately and departed for college soon after. Within a year of starting his career, he married her quietly and simply, without any formal ceremony. Once Willie was gone, my mother-in-law's behavior took a turn for the worse. Surprisingly, she stopped all housework, which had been a regular part of her daily routine. It seemed her new pastime was finding fault with me. She stopped cooking, something she had previously taken pride in, and would sit at the dining table waiting for me to return from work. The moment I stepped into the kitchen to prepare a meal, the criticisms began. "You're so inefficient. At this rate, it'll take you all night," she scoffed. I admitted I wasn't skilled at cooking, mainly because I had relied on her for meals. Whenever I did manage to cook, she critiqued every dish relentlessly. "This tastes awful," she would say, grimacing. "I'm sorry. I'm trying my best," I would respond, only to hear her retort, "You're astonishingly tone deaf when it comes to flavors, Patricia. It's a good thing Willie never had to eat this." If she disliked it so much, I thought, why didn't she just cook herself? It seemed her goal was merely to berate me. Her complaints weren't limited to my cooking. She began to nitpick everything I did, from chores I wasn't accustomed to handling to laundry. "Why are there so many wrinkles in the laundry? You have to vacuum every nook and cranny. You really can't do anything right. Didn't your family teach you anything?" These jabs at my upbringing were especially painful. She would sigh disdainfully and say, "I don't know how you won over Ethan, but I can't see much charm in you as a woman." She always concluded with the same hurtful line, "If you hadn't come along, Willie would have never left." I realized her heart was aching from Willie's absence. Perhaps it was a case of empty nest syndrome. I told myself that if venting her frustrations on me helped her cope, I should just bear it. However, her antagonism intensified after a particular event: the announcement of Willie's wife, Teresa, being pregnant. The joy she displayed was unlike anything I had seen before. "It's Will's baby. It's bound to be adorable. He'll be my first grandchild," she exclaimed with genuine happiness, watching their elation. Despite the ongoing challenges at home, I found a small piece of joy for myself. My mother-in-law's excitement over the impending arrival of her great-grandchild was nothing short of overwhelming. The catalyst for her exuberance came when Willie asked if his wife, Teresa, could have their baby at our place, given that her family lived an hour away and they lacked local support. Thrilled to be needed, my mother-in-law immediately agreed to help. Joy palpable. Willie's calls became a daily occurrence, each one sending her excitement soaring even higher. She dove into preparations with fervor, clearing out Willie's old room, organizing the space for the baby, and meticulously planning everything from nursery decor to essential baby supplies. The moment I got home from work, she enlisted my help. "Patricia, I've taken care of the vacuuming in Willie's room. Could you handle wiping down the floors and the windows? And make sure to wax them too," she instructed, her tone urgent. "This weekend, we're off to buy a crib," she added, as if it were the most natural plan for our weekend. Juggling these tasks late into the night after my shifts was grueling, and any attempt to shortcut the process was met with a stern command to start over. Before long, her requests extended to finances. "Patricia, I need you to withdraw some money tomorrow. There are a few more things I want to pick up for the baby," she declared one morning. I hesitated, concerned by the rapid pace of spending. Shouldn't we wait for Teresa and Willie to arrive before we buy so much? "Maybe Teresa would like to choose some things herself," I suggested, hoping to inject some practicality into the frenzy. Her response was sharp and dismissive. "How can you be so detached? It's Ethan's grandchild, after all." "Oh, but of course, you're not related by blood. You wouldn't understand, would you?" The accusation stung, and I tried to clarify my position gently. "It's not that I don't care. I just thought it might be nice for Teresa to have a say in her own child's preparations," I explained. But my attempt to reason with her seemed to hit a nerve. She shot me a piercing glare, and I realized I may have crossed the line. I watched helplessly as she turned and retreated to her room, deeply upset. That night, I reflected on our harsh exchange, feeling the weight of her words. The following morning, she stayed in her room, likely still angry about our conversation. Ethan was about to leave on a business trip when he paused at her door to make a final remark. "I'm heading out. Don't dampen Mom's enthusiasm about the grandchild. She's been different since Willie moved out. You've noticed it too, right?" I nodded but added, "However, if we use up all our funds now, what will we do when Willie and Teresa need our help?" Ethan frowned, misunderstanding my concern. "Are you suggesting I don't make enough money?" Ethan said, but I quickly reassured him, "That's not it at all." However, it was too late. He left visibly upset, leaving me alone to ponder the delicate balance of family dynamics and financial responsibility. As the one managing our household finances for over 12 years, I considered it prudent to think ahead. Ethan had always reassured me that my part-time income was for my own use, so I diligently saved whatever I didn't spend, viewing it as a shared resource for our future. However, the financial stability of our household had been steadily deteriorating over the past 4 years. Ethan's salary had shrunk to a third of what it was when we first got married, due to his company's declining performance. Despite the uncertainty about the company's future and his job security until retirement, Ethan was reluctant to seek new employment, unwilling to relinquish his role as department head, primarily to maintain appearances in front of my mother-in-law. As a result, I took on the responsibility of paying our rent while he managed other living expenses. We kept this arrangement hidden from my mother-in-law to preserve Ethan's dignity. One day, feeling the weight of recent tensions, I decided to leave work early to apologize to my mother-in-law. When I arrived home, she was already seated at the dining table, waiting for me. "I'm sorry about yesterday. I may have been too harsh," I began, but she interrupted me with an icy demeanor. "Willie and Teresa are coming back to have their baby here. I need you to move out," she stated bluntly. Stunned, I barely managed to ask, "I have to leave?" She confirmed, "Yes, we don't need another mother figure. You've been redundant for a while now. Willie and his family will be living here. Make sure you're out by tomorrow." Her words hit me like a freight train. I had never felt fully accepted by the family. I had always been the outsider. Now, with Willie's return for the birth, it was clear I was a failure. "You were allowed to experience raising a child. Be grateful for that. We have no obligation to support you anymore. It seems Ethan is tired of you too. Maybe he's getting along well with a new girlfriend by now." Shocked and heartbroken, I grabbed my bag and left the house, wandering aimlessly to calm my shaken spirit. I tried calling Ethan, but despite my mother-in-law's insinuations, he didn't answer, no matter how many times I dialed. I even called his office, only to find out he had taken a few days off. The suspicions seated by my mother-in-law started to seem more plausible. Overwhelmed with emotion and tears streaming down my face, I found myself in front of the pub near the station, a place Ethan and I used to frequent when we first moved here. It still stood as a relic of happier times. As I entered, the owner's face clouded with concern before he recognized me. "Hey, long time no see." "It's been about 6 years," I replied, trying to muster a smile despite my distress. "Yes, it's been a while. I remember you," he said, offering a nod of recognition that brought a brief sense of relief. "Can I get a beer and a mixed plate of charbroiled chicken?" I asked for a small comfort in this familiar place, a refuge from the storm swirling through my life. As I settled into the pub, I engaged in light conversation with the owner, a man of few words, while sipping my cold beer and savoring the charbroiled chicken. Pulling out my cell phone, I lit up the screen to reveal a photo of Ethan and me taken on Willie's 17th birthday. He looked dashing in the slim suit we had chosen together, and I found myself wishing for a closer family bond. The beer seemed to wash away the day's troubles, and as I contemplated my next steps, I browsed for moving companies, discovering one available for the next day. I bookmarked a couple of junk removal services, saving their contacts in my favorites, and changed my screensaver to something less personal. A sense of mental clarity began to return, and the meal tasted exceptionally good. Perhaps a small comfort amid the chaos. I decided to give the situation more thought once I was back home. As I walked away from the pub, a young waitress hurried towards me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Patricia?" she asked. Having noted my previous screensaver, she hesitated, then dropped a bombshell. She believed my husband was having an affair with one of their employees. We exchanged contact details, and she promised to keep me updated. Suddenly, the pieces began to fit together, validating the harsh words of my mother-in-law. Instead of feeling sad, a fierce anger surged within me. It was time to confront this head-on. That evening, I contacted the moving company and resolved to leave the next day. If there was no conspiracy and my mother-in-law and Willie were indeed plotting against me, I no longer felt obliged to maintain appearances. I packed my belongings relentlessly until midnight. The movers arrived promptly the next morning, and I instructed them to take everything I had purchased. I was determined to erase any trace of my presence. My mother-in-law was taken aback by my resolve. "I'm taking everything I bought. You can start fresh tomorrow," I declared. "I'm taking everything I bought," I declared, barely suppressing a laugh at her protests. The movers efficiently cleared out my belongings, leaving behind only the baby gear and her old dresser, the remnants of a life before I arrived. "Well then, I bid you farewell. There shouldn't be a trace of me left, so enjoy your new life with Ethan, Willie, and his family," I said coolly, leaving her stunned as I placed the keys on the table and exited the house, the movers trailing behind with my possessions. I decided to stay with a colleague temporarily, feeling a sense of completion and relief wash over me. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in months. 2 weeks later, Ethan finally reached out, his voice tinged with confusion and urgency. "Patricia, where are you? Willie and his family are here. Aren't you coming home soon?" "No, I'm not coming back," I replied firmly, recalling his mother's command for me to leave. Meanwhile, the young waitress from the pub had kept her promise, sending me a photo of Ethan chatting intimately with another woman at the pub and later entering the hotel with her. This betrayal erased any remaining affection I had for him. Armed with evidence of the affair, I was ready to confront the situation fully. No longer bound by illusions of my old life, I had had enough. I didn't hesitate to make it clear to Ethan over the phone. "Willie and his family are moving in with you, right?" I figured as much. I heard they'd been struggling financially, bouncing between part-time jobs since Willie graduated from vocational school. "I want you back, Patricia," Ethan replied, desperation lacing his voice. "I went to the pharmacy and they said you were taking some time off." "Yeah, I needed a break," I said nonchalantly. "But I'm fine, so don't worry about me. Your mom and Willie probably prefer having the house to themselves without me around." My blunt remark left Ethan speechless. He knew all too well that his mother and Willie had never accepted me, but he chose to ignore it. "All right, I need to talk, so I'll come back there," he said, a plea evident in his tone. A few days later, I returned to the house for the first time since leaving. Inside, I noticed new furniture and appliances. Willie and Teresa barely acknowledged my presence, nodding from their seats on the sofa without standing. As I sat down, my mother-in-law glared at me with a mix of shock and disdain, the atmosphere thick with tension. Before I could rush my visit and leave, Willie confronted me. "What are you doing here? You took everything from the house. What kind of monster does that? Dad's been supporting you and you've had it easy." I exhaled deeply, frustration boiling over. "I took everything because I paid for it. I was clearing out all traces of myself, just as you all wanted, right? That's crazy. There's no way you could afford all that just working part-time at the pharmacy," Willie shot back. Turning to face Ethan, I replied firmly, "We've been getting by on what both Ethan and I earn. And for your information, Ethan's company hasn't been doing well. His salary has dropped significantly. For the past 4 years, I've been the one covering the shortfall. I've been paying our rent." My mother-in-law's face registered shock as she turned to look at Ethan, who awkwardly avoided her gaze. "I'm not just a part-timer. I'm a druggist, and the pay is quite good. I make more than Ethan now." The room went silent, the tension palpable. I turned to Willie. I decided it was time to face some hard truths. "Since you're going to live here now, it's time for you to start taking responsibility. You'll be paying the rent to help your grandmother." Willie's face twisted in surprise. "Rent? How much is it?" "It's $7,200, I stated firmly. "Good luck, because it seems my role here is over. I have no obligation to take care of you anymore. You're going to be a father soon, Willie. It's time to pull yourself together." Teresa, overhearing our conversation, suddenly spoke up, panic evident in her voice. "Wait, $7,200? Weren't we supposed to live here for free?" I stood ready to leave, satisfied that I had made my point clear. Covering rent and living expenses is just part of life. Good luck figuring it out. As I walked out, leaving them to absorb this new reality, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The chapter of my life filled with neglect and ingratitude was finally closing. I almost burst out laughing at the absurdity of the situation but managed to keep my composure. Don't worry, Teresa. There are cheaper places available. Ethan still makes a decent salary after all, I remarked, watching her face relax slightly. Then, with a heavy dose of sarcasm, I added, "Oh, and since I'll be leaving, life might get tough for you, Ethan, especially with your mistress." At that, Teresa's composure shattered, and she dissolved into tears. "What are you talking about?" my husband stammered, looking panicked. Through her tears, Teresa responded, "Oh, your mother told me about the new woman. I guess it's time to end my role as a wife too." Ethan looked flustered. "My mother said what?" he sputtered, realizing too late that I knew far more than he wished I did. "It hasn't even been 6 days since I left the house." "Ethan, wouldn't that hurt Grace if she knew?" I mused aloud. At the mention of Grace's name, Ethan's face went pale, confirming my suspicions. "This isn't the right atmosphere to discuss divorce papers, but I'll be in touch about that later," I declared, standing up to leave. Neither Ethan nor Willie could find the words to respond. They remained silent as I grabbed my bag. However, my mother-in-law abruptly stood up, slamming her hands on the table and yelling with surprising vigor for her age, "What the hell? It's all your fault. Our home is in shambles." I shot back without hesitation. "It was you who told me to leave, you who hinted at Ethan's affair, and you who interfered with my relationship with Willie. Everything is because of you." A rush of anger surged through me, and I regretted not being more assertive in my relationship with Willie and not standing up to her sooner. "Willie has nothing to do with this, Ethan. It's time for you to step up. You're going through a hard time. You should support him as his wife and take responsibility as a family member," I admonished. "What is she even talking about?" my mother-in-law muttered, bewildered. If she hadn't called Willie back home, if she hadn't hinted at Ethan's affair, I would still be supporting Ethan in this home. "Where are you, Willie? Why are you still here?" "It's all her fault," my mother-in-law concluded, her lips pressed tightly together, trembling with emotion. I slipped past her and quickly left the room. Afterward, Ethan agreed to the divorce rather easily. My determination and the undeniable evidence of the affair left him no other choice. Shortly after, it seemed they began the process of moving out of the apartment. In the end, Willie and Teresa returned to their own apartment, opting not to live with my mother-in-law. Ethan appeared to be considering remarriage, but Grace was furious over the alimony and his request for her to live with his mother. I heard they were now deliberating their next steps after everything that transpired. My mother-in-law eventually ended up in a care facility. It's somewhat melancholy to reflect on the irony of her situation. After all the dedication she poured into raising her son and caring for her grandson, it seems they are now ready to move on without her. Perhaps, in their eyes, she had fulfilled her role. If my mother-in-law had held her tongue back then, and if it had merely been a simple return home for childbirth, maybe we could have continued living together even after the divorce. But things unfolded differently. Willie sent me an apology letter recently. In it, he expressed his childhood longing for more affection and explained that he couldn't talk to me freely because his grandmother disapproved. He also shared how pleased he was whenever I attended his school events. Reading his words, I wondered if I should have made more effort to connect with him. Maybe then our relationship could have taken a different path. Despite the end of our familial ties, I find myself silently hoping for Willie's happiness in life. As for me, I've returned to my job as a druggist and rented an apartment close to my workplace. I didn't feel right keeping the furniture and appliances I had taken from the house, so I arranged for a junk removal service to take them away. Life without the constant criticism and interference of my mother-in-law has turned out to be peaceful and comfortable. For now, I am focused on living for my own happiness, no longer beholden to fulfilling someone else's expectations or desires. It's a new chapter, one where I can finally breathe freely and look forward to what comes next. Hey, I'm Kenneth, but everyone calls me Ken. I just turned 33, and let me tell you, I've got quite a story to share. Before today's events, I didn't really believe in karma or anything spiritual. I thought it was all just in people's heads. But now, I've had a change of heart. I totally believe that what goes around comes around. And it's all because of my mean mother-in-law and her family. Well, except for my amazing wife, she's the exception. Despite growing up around all that negativity, she's still a wonderful person. Now let me tell you about the crazy stuff that happened on a sunny Wednesday morning in my house. Hey, could you come down here real quick? What's up, honey? I need to ask you something, and please don't say no. My wife gave me those adorable puppy dog eyes, and honestly, who could resist that? She explained how her mom, Georgina, was coming to town and needed a place to stay. I knew what she was getting at, and I quickly said no. But babe, it's just for the weekend. Can't you handle having a sweet old lady around for a couple of days? Let me tell you, that lady was anything but sweet. She was like pure evil, I kid you not. Dealing with her was like living in a horror movie. I often wonder how my wife turned out so kind despite having such a nightmare for a mother. As I started explaining why I couldn't handle having Georgina around and suggested she stay in a hotel, Kimberly started looking really sad. And like I said, I can't resist her sad face. She's got me wrapped around her finger. So reluctantly, I agreed. Kimberly was over the moon, thanking me like crazy. Since you're being so good about this, I'll make sure she behaves too. Don't worry. Hopefully you won't even have to see each other. It'll all be smooth sailing, I promise. Well, that promise didn't last long because what happened next was totally unexpected. It was Friday afternoon, and Georgina, my mother-in-law, was about to arrive. We prepared the guest room with everything she might need and some stuff she likes, hoping it would keep her from causing drama. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Kimberly, busy in the kitchen, called out, "I think she's here, Kenny. Can you get the door, please?" I prepared myself and opened the door. Standing there was a woman with a not-so-friendly expression. It wasn't a smile, it looked more like a scowl. My mother-in-law, I greeted her. "Hello, Kenneth. Hi there. How was your trip? Are you doing okay?" I welcomed her inside, taking her stuff and doing all the host stuff without being too pushy. But I could feel my irritation building as she started her never-ending complaints. "Wow, Kenneth, the patio looks amazing. Did you do this?" "Yeah, it looks absolutely lovely. I'll need to snap some photos soon." "Oh, could you take those bags upstairs to my room, dear? And could you also make me a coffee? I'd like a caramel macchiato with whipped cream, please." Did she think this was a Starbucks? If you've ever seen A Streetcar Named Desire, you might get an idea of what Georgina was like. She acted just like Blanche, all high and mighty with a touch of fake innocence. She strutted around like she was a gift to the world. I can't stand that kind of arrogance, especially when she's being rude. Just then, Kimberly came out of the kitchen to greet her mom. "You look stunning." "Oh, come on, Kimberly, do I? You're just saying that." "Well, you do look great. It's this new diet I'm on. You should try it. You could use it, sweetheart." "But not this weekend. This weekend is for relaxing. That's why I ordered my caramel macchiato." Speaking of which, Kenneth, when's my coffee going to be ready? I'm thirsty. I need something to drink right now. I might faint. See what I have to deal with. After enjoying a delicious lunch prepared by my wonderful wife, I had to quickly Google how to make a caramel macchiato. Georgina made it her mission to point out every little flaw in the meal, followed by a quick, "It's fine. Don't worry too much," to soften the blow. But she made sure to remind us to be extra careful next time to avoid making those silly mistakes, as she called them. She seemed to enjoy talking down to us, and while I could handle it, I could see it was getting to Kimberly. I mean, how could she not be bothered? That was her mom, after all, and Kimberly didn't have a mean bone in her body. I couldn't say the same for myself, though. I'm the type who likes to get revenge when I can. Later in the afternoon, Georgina went on and on about how much she loved the house. Well, she had a unique way of expressing her love for it. Sure, my time in Bora Bora was nice, but Zanzibar was even better. The scenery was stunning and the people were lovely. This vacation won't be as fancy as those, but it's still a vacation. Maybe it'll humble me a bit, since I've been to so many fancy places. It'll be a nice change of pace, I guess. I'll be honest, I zoned out of the conversation many times, and whenever I checked back in, it was still going on. Georgina had a way of making things drag on longer than they needed to. Anyway, we spent the afternoon chatting, mostly Kimberly and Georgina. I was just there, like a decoration, making sure Kimberly was comfortable. Every now and then, I'd chime in to make it seem like I was paying attention. Around 4 p.m. that evening, things started to get a bit weird. You know, Kimberly, I've been complimenting your house ever since I got here, and I have to say, it's stunning. Thanks, Mom. We've been working hard to make it nice, and Kenny and I spent a lot of time getting ready for your visit. It's so good that I can't keep this beauty to myself. What do you mean, Mom? What are you saying? Well, you know, on my trips to places like Cancun, Fiji, or India, I always bring along some friends or family. I don't like traveling alone, especially as I'm getting older. It's become a bit of a tradition for me to have companions like Ursula or Justine. Oh, that sounds nice. How are they? It's been a while since we talked. Funny you ask, because they're actually on their way here now. You can catch up with them yourself. Kimberly nearly chokes on her coffee at this unexpected news. I would have done a spit take too if I had anything in my mouth, because I was shocked at what she just said. But I kept my cool and managed to say, Kim, let's go to the kitchen, now. We headed to the kitchen to talk about this bombshell. Please tell me she's joking, babe. I don't think she's joking, but you only told me she was coming. We only prepped for one person. I'm just as surprised as you are, babe. I didn't know anything until now, just like you. I started pacing in the kitchen. So what do? I guess we'll have to tell her we only prepped for one person, and maybe we can put the girls up in a hotel. They can come over during the day to hang out with Mom. I sighed in frustration. This was also inconvenient, wasn't it? Note the sarcasm. As much as I cared about Ursula and Justine, my aunt-in-law and sister-in-law, I wasn't keen on entertaining them all weekend. They were a bit like their mother, not as bad, but having them all around would be chaotic. We argued about it until Georgina herself showed up in the kitchen. What's the problem? I think it's a nice idea to have other family members join us for the weekend. She started pouting, and strangely, it had the same effect on Kimberly as Kimberly's pouting had on me. When she wanted to, Georgina could get her way with those puppy dog eyes. I guess Kimberly inherited that skill from her mom. Oh no, Mom, please don't be upset. It was a nice thought, but we just can't handle this sudden change, especially on such short notice. Kenny and I were thinking of putting Ursula and Justine up in a nearby hotel, and they can come over during the day. Angeline is also coming with them. So you want 4 extra people in the house? I'm sorry, Georgina, but that's not going to work. Oh, Kenny dear, don't be such a stick in the mud. Jolene has to come. She hasn't been part of the tradition, and she really wants to join in. Plus, she's your younger sister-in-law. We have to make room for her. And honestly, you're not even considered part of our real family, so it makes sense for you to leave and for the girls to stay. It's just for a couple of days after all. Mom, how can you say that? Kenny is our real family. Is he though? You're putting him above your actual sisters. That's not what I meant, Mom. The main issue is space. We're worried there won't be enough room for everyone. I'm glad you brought that up because I've come up with a solution that will please everyone. Okay, let's hear it. Okay, so here's my idea. Ursula and I can share the bed in the guest room since it's big enough, and Jolene can sleep in Kimberly's bed. There was silence. I was completely lost. I looked at my wife, and she seemed just as confused. Finally, I asked, so you want 3 people to sleep in one bed? That's uncomfortable and inappropriate, don't you think? Yeah, Mom, we're adults now. It's not appropriate for me, my husband, and my sister to share a bed. Aha, I knew you'd say that, which is why I think it's best if Kenneth doesn't stay here during this time. Again, silence. At that moment, I think she finally lost it. So you want me to leave my own house? Kenny dear, don't call me that. Kenneth, don't talk to me like that. Kimberly, are you going to let him speak to me like that? Look, I don't appreciate you coming into my house and making last-minute demands. It's not fair. If you wanted a girls' trip, that would have been fine if you planned it in advance. Why didn't you just tell us what you wanted? And saying I'm not your real family was rude. I didn't think you'd get so upset now. Honestly, you're acting childish, and don't you think, Kim? I don't know what to say, Mom. I don't think it's fair. Oh, you dumb people and your sensitivity. I didn't do this on purpose. It must have just slipped my mind. I'm sure you understand. I didn't quite understand, but when I looked at my wife, she was silently pleading with me. I caved in, feeling frustrated, and said, Georgina, better communication would have been appreciated. As I said earlier, I wouldn't have minded if you ladies wanted a girls' trip for the weekend. I could have gone on a trip with the guys or worked at the orphanage. But springing this on us isn't fair. We're adults, even if you see us as your kids. You're a guest in our home, and you need to respect that. I stayed calm and politely pointed out her mistake. She scoffed, walked around, and even laughed at times, seemingly trying to avoid the embarrassment of being confronted by her sister-in-law. Nevertheless, I stood my ground. You want to have a girls' trip and have everyone here for the weekend. Fine, you want me out of the house? That's fine too, but I'll be back after the weekend. With that, I kissed my wife on the cheek and headed to our room. Kimberly tried to reason with her mother, telling her that what she did wasn't okay and that she seriously upset me. But Georgina just laughed it off, treating me like I was overreacting. I packed some clothes in a duffel bag and left. I booked a hotel room online and headed there, but not before stopping by the orphanage where I regularly volunteered. As I mentioned before, the orphanage is called Open Arms, and I love working there. But dealing with unruly and disobedient toddlers, children, and teenagers is no easy task. As I spent the evening playing and helping out the children, I couldn't shake off the thought of how to get back at Georgina. I'm not evil, or at least I don't think I am, but I do believe in teaching people a lesson when they deserve it. I guess that's why I'm good at my job. I had a good connection with the kids, showing them both love and discipline so they wouldn't take advantage of me. We got along well, to the point where some of them could tell something was bothering me. Ken, is everything okay? One of them asked. Yeah, everything's fine, I said, apologizing for losing my cool. I explained the situation to him in simple terms. He was just a kid, after all. But surprisingly, he understood and even sympathized with me. With all due respect, Ken, your mother-in-law is crazy. Tell me about it, I replied. You've got to get back at her somehow, just to teach her a lesson, right? But how? We thought about it for a while, but I couldn't come up with anything. Then Maverick said something that changed everything. We could help. What do you mean? We could help. If you take a handful of us kids and bring us to your house, we could ruin her weekend. I thought about it, and then it clicked. Maverick, true to his name, was an evil genius. It was a perfect plan. The kids would get a fun weekend away, and I could get back at my mother-in-law for disrespecting me. We made plans like two evil geniuses plotting world domination and waited until the next day to put our revenge into action. The next day, Saturday, went like this. Kimberly answered the doorbell and was surprised to see Maverick and a few other kids. Why, hello, Kimberly, Kenny. Oh, Maverick, hello, how are you? Then she noticed the other kids and looked confused. What's going on, babe? Oh, nothing. I thought I'd bring the kids along to join in Georgina's lovely vacation, I said as I walked into the room, followed by 5 kids aged 6 to 10. They were known as the rowdiest bunch, but they could be sweet when they wanted to be. It was when they felt disrespected that they'd let loose. I promised them ice cream if they caused chaos. Hello, Kenneth, how are you? Oh, who are these lovely children? Good morning, Georgina. I hope you're all well. I see the rest of the gang made it. Hey, Kenneth, how are you? I'm well, thank you. Who are these kids? Oh, these children. They're from the orphanage. Yes, we can see that, but why are they here? Good question. Maverick, would you like to answer that? Well, Ken told us about the lovely vacation you were having in his home, and we've never been on a vacation, so he invited us over to join in. The in-laws, who were sipping mimosas and eating croissants in the living area, gasped in horror and shared looks of disbelief. Some of the kids started grabbing food from the table, bacon, pancakes, orange juice, causing chaos. Georgina stood up and pulled me aside. What's the meaning of this? Just as Maverick said, I wanted the kids to have their own little vacation. I'm sure you wouldn't mind. How can you bring all these kids into the house? This is too much, and someone named Maverick is bound to cause trouble. This was supposed to be a relaxing weekend for me and the girls, you know this. Oh well, I'm sure you wouldn't mind. It's only for a couple of days after all. Listen, I know you're upset. No, you listen here, Georgina. I'm tired of you acting like you own the place. If you want to stay here for a vacation, that's fine, but the kids are staying too. They deserve to enjoy just as much as you do. So maybe next time you'll remember it's not nice to inconvenience others. And with that, I didn't give her a chance to respond. I walked back into the living room to see the chaos unfold. The little girl, don't you dare touch that. That's an expensive designer bag. Stop it. You little troublemakers are causing chaos. Is this what vacations are normally like? Because if so, count me out. The ladies were being harassed by the unruly children, causing chaos. You might wonder how Kimberly felt. She was in the corner snickering. She found it funny too. You might also wonder how I felt watching my house get torn apart. It was worth it to see the looks on my in-laws' faces. I didn't mind cleaning up. Maverick promised they'd help. I just wanted to witness the chaos as the prim older ladies dealt with the chaotic children. Well, everything seems in order. I'll be on my way. I'll pick up the kids tomorrow or Monday. Cheerio. And with that, I left, laughing in my hotel room. I called Kimberly and told her the kids weren't meant to bother her, just the snobby ladies. If she needed a break, she could stay with me. That day was one of the best of my life.